Hey, Ricky, I'm so glad that you've joined the Charlie Paparelli show. This is going to be a lot of fun.
I
You're
think
just
it will be
laughing.
too, Charlie.
Yeah. I'll tell you what I want to do. This is really my goal for today. I want to talk about networking. All right. I want to talk about you and networking. Uh, I've watched you for 30 years. 30 years doing this in our community. And yes, you wrote the book, The Heart of Networking, and it's in its third edition, you're saying, right?
Yes, sir.
Revised edition, which is fabulous. So, what my goal is to pull from you your motivation, your methods, and your secrets, okay, on this topic of successful networking. You know, these last 30 years, I look back on you and you've got so many, you talk about networking very little. You do networking all the time. And that just makes it, and you make it just look so easy, and that's kind of this secret sauce that we're trying to dig into a little bit here. But, this whole networking term, this term networking rather, it's to me, it's so overused and so cloudy, and I noticed recently you were asked to give a presentation, which I wasn't able to attend. And I was wondering, what you pulled together there. What did you present when you talked about networking? Tell me who you presented to first of all.
I've had three or four of them in the last couple of months, so I don't know which one you're referring to. The
Well,
most recent, I
yeah,
spoke to the Technology Association of Georgia's
okay.
12 days of career enhancement. And I basically began the presentation by saying, a lot of you are probably wondering why you're up so early in the morning to come hear some old man speak about networking when most people think networking is no more than boozing and schmoozing, playing golf, patting each other on the back. Nothing could be further from the truth. Networking is about relationship creation for the betterment of both individuals, but for the betterment of the community. And if you're doing networking right, it's really not networking, it's relationship creation. And when you figure out how to do that and you're not only bought into it, but you're passionate about it, great things happen. I've been using a piece in most of my presentations that I call the dash. And the
Well, one
greatest net,
second. One second. I want to ask you a question.
all right,
I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I'm going to be doing this a ton of time. Is
I've been there before.
yeah, you made you made this comment. That networking is not boozing and schmoozing, or right? That's what we all think it is. Oh, I'm going to have to walk into that cocktail party. This is going to be awful, and you don't know what to say to people. And that's not networking. You made that comment here, and you made the comment in your book. It's really about relationships and building relationships for the betterment of each other. Well, that is even more intimidating than boozing and schmoozing. All right. Think about listening from the other side. Okay, I want you to go in that room and let's not use the word networking. Let's use the definition. I want you to go in that room and I want you to build relationships with people where they'll benefit you and benefit them, and you'll benefit them. I don't even know where to go with that. So, what do you do with that? I mean, what do you say to somebody?
Well, fortunately, I didn't have to wake up one morning and saying, that's what I need to do. Uh, Otherwise, I'd have been probably boozing and smoozing, which would have been maybe a lot more fun. Uh, I grew up under a father who was the epitome of networking before networking was a word. In the 50s and 60s, my father, who was a door to door life insurance salesperson, and what could be worse in the world than a door to door life insurance salesperson? He had just gotten out of the military. He had went to Fort Benning to do his OCS, and while he was there, he re-injured a knee that he had operated on twice playing football for the University of Georgia.
Wow.
And so he had no job. He had a baby because mom and dad had me when they were still in college. They were seniors, so he had no real prospects, and he just decided he was going to go out and do the best he could to make a career. And he taught me growing up, he said, son, when you go into a new situation, when you go into a new room, when you go into a new place, walk up to anybody in the room and shake their hand. Just look them in the eye and say, I'm Ricky Steele. How are you doing? What's your name? Or anything close to that. And I followed him. My mother had a tendency on a fairly regular basis to call my father in the middle of the afternoon after I got out of school or at other times and say, come pick him up or I'm going to kill him. And
Oh, well,
so,
what a blessing. So she sort of forced you on him
no question.
while he
And
was working.
while he was working, he would pick
Oh,
me
that's
up at the
cool.
house. We would go someplace. We would go into
How old were you back then?
8, 9, 10.
No kidding.
Yeah, we
Okay.
would go into an office or a meeting or somewhere, and everybody would say, "Oh my gosh, there's Big Dick Steele. It's good to see him. How you doing, Dick?" And he would shake everybody's hand, or we would go fill up with gas. He would get out of the car. That was when they pumped your gas, checked your tire pressure in all 4 tires, checked your oil, washed your front and back windshield, and then cleaned out your ashtray because everybody smoked back in those days. But Dad would shake the hand of the person doing all of that. And how you family? How you been doing? This, that, and the
You
other.
actually get out of the car?
Get out of the car and shake the man's hand and shoot the bull with him. Then we would go to a restaurant, have a cup of coffee or sandwich or whatever, and he would see the mayor over the other side of the room and go over. And that point in Columbus, Georgia, it was B. Ed Johnson. Hey, B. Ed, how you been doing? Hadn't seen you in a while. Missed you at church last Sunday. He was. It's a biblical term, but it's not. He wasn't biblical, but my father was no respecter of persons. Whether you were the president of the bank, and he had an office in Jimmy Blanchard's building when Jimmy Blanchard was the chairman of Synovus, and or the guy that was strictly pumping gas. He didn't care what your station in life was. He was going to treat you equally.
That was that what you're talking to in the Bible, what it reminds me of, and maybe this is what you're referencing or thinking about too, is it's where Jesus said when you get invited to the party, don't sit at the head of the table because you think you're pretty important, because it's going to be pretty embarrassing if something more important comes in and the host tells you to move.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Right?
Dad would hang at the back. He never wanted to be the show. I didn't learn that part of the lesson maybe quite as good, but he never wanted to be the show. He wanted to be there to serve, and
Tell
he
me
was.
something else that you saw. Here you are, Nunn. I love these observations that you're making. That you went to the gas station and you just kind of sitting there. I could just see little Ricky sitting there watching Dad. Like, what's he? You're not even questioning what's he doing or why he's doing it. You're just watching it. We're so young, we don't analyze it. We just see it. And then to go to the diner and do the same thing. What else did you see with him? What other stories or what sort of stories come to mind with what you observed as a young man? Because it's really part of your patterning that kind of will take you forward in a life.
He was a ask forgiveness, not ask permission individual. If he saw something that needed to be done, he did it. That's gotten me in a lot of trouble over my lifetime. But not long ago, I was at a University of Georgia football game, and you may or may not know this name, Don Liebern, who was chairman of the Board of Regents. Anyway, he was my football coach growing up, and he and Dad started the Pop Warner Football League down in Columbus, Georgia. And I'd not seen Mr. Liebern in 25 years. And I went over to him and said, "Hey, Coach, how you doing?" He said, "Oh, my God, boy, I haven't seen you in ever and ever." I said, "Yes, sir." And he said, "I know your dad died. I'm sorry I couldn't go to the funeral," and this, that, and the other. He said, "Your daddy was the wildest person I ever knew." And I said, "Well, Mr. Liebern, he was that and more." And he said, "One day we were building, we were in the process of creating Pop Warner football, and we were using a field across from Columbus High School in Columbus." And he said, "There were a couple of trees in the way. And I told that your dad that I would call the mayor and see if we couldn't get those removed so we'd have the playing field." Dad said, "Hell, I got a chainsaw in the back of my car. Let's do it now." And Don said, "But Dick, we can't do it." My dad went by the nickname Dick. He said, "Dick, we just can't do that." And Dad said, "Well, Don, I don't know what we can do, but I got a chainsaw in the back of my car, and that tree's coming. Those trees are coming down." And they went down, and he said, it caused a lot of consternation around the community, but the ball field got finished, and we had a great season, and this, that, and the other. And
Yeah, what do you do?
conversely,
What do you do when once the trees are down, right?
somebody's got to come clean them up, and that's when the city got involved. But to do an aside, because I love my dad so much, and because he taught me, I am who he helped create, is either that year or the next year, 2 doors down from where we lived was a sweet family, the Hellman family, Ellie Hellman and her daddy David, her mama Celie, and her baby sister Betsy, Jewish family. And, we weren't where we are today in 1964, 63. Anyway, cheerleading tryouts came, and, cheerleaders were chosen, and Ellie was pretty good. She was pretty athletic. And anyway, she didn't make the cheerleading squad. And my mother wasn't on the committee, but she began calling some of the ladies, and they said, why did Ellie make the, I see her in the front yard with, playing in the front yard. She's very, very good. And they said, we've never had a Jewish cheerleader in the club. We were all white. We were all segregated. And I guess Jewish folks didn't deserve to be cheerleaders, I guess, at that point in time. And so my mother
Although they weren't segregated, they were certainly set aside.
Set aside.
Yeah.
Anyway, my mother told my father that happened, and my father called a meeting of the Pop Water League and said, Ellie Hellman is going to be a cheerleader for the Clubview Bulldogs. And they said, but she didn't make the team. He said, did I stutter? She's going to be a cheerleader for the Clubview Bulldogs, or I will close the league down today. And Ellie Hellman was a cheerleader.
Why did he have that power to close the league down? How could he make good on that
president? He was the president, CEO, and he cut down the trees.
Oh, that's for that one. Okay.
So
what happened?
She became a cheerleader. And then, of course, the stories. Most of the audience don't, but the stories are in the book of how he integrated a hotel that he owned and how he was at the forefront of the civil rights movement in Columbus, Georgia, even though he never got any credit for it, nor he asked for any credit. But he was always pushing the envelope. He was a very conservative business person, fiscal conservative, but he had social liberal tendencies. And a lot of people said, well, how did he get that?
Where do you think he picked that up? Where do you think those characteristics or those beliefs, those principles that he went by, where did you think he developed that? You think it was from the football team on the UGA football team, or from the service, or what? I mean, where did he get that from? Because he didn't grow up that way.
Probably the service had something to do with it, because on the football team, there were no African-American ball players in 1947. I don't remember when the first African ball player played at University of Georgia, probably the late 60s. It might have been the service, but his mom and daddy were very good people, very active in the church, helping out wherever they could. But I tell this story to some people that ask me that same question. I say, my dad was somewhat colorblind. He didn't care whether you were red, white, black, orange, or green.
Yeah.
His favorite color was green. And he was an entrepreneurial business person. And if you wanted to buy a product or service from him, he didn't care who you were or what you believed in. He wanted to provide a service. And so he began allowing African Americans to stay in the Ralston Hotel, which was the largest hotel in the city of Columbus, in 1964. And later, he owned a AA baseball team. And when the team would travel by bus to Macon or Savannah or Charlotte or wherever, Birmingham, Barron's, anyway, they would drop the white ball players off at one hotel and the African American and Latino ball players off at another. And he said, these guys are on a team. They're going to stay at the same hotel, which made him a hero to a lot of the ball players, not so much so with other ball players, but he just did not care. And he lived in a prominent house on the main area in Columbus, and every year he hosted a party for the entire team. And I guarantee you, for many, many years before and many to come, there were not a lot of African-American people, ball players, any kind, inside a home of that size, being entertained with food and booze and celebrating the team that they played on.
I bet you he must have gotten some pushback also from your neighbors in that neighborhood.
Well, there was
they all didn't believe that.
No, there was one particular racist in Columbus, Georgia, who owned a sign company, and he created a lot of trouble. And we often had police officers parked in front of our house when Dad had gotten death threats, and so it was a hectic time growing up. And I write about this in all three of my books. But I'm 12 years old. I'm a bat boy for a AA baseball team that he owned. It's the only reason I got the job, I guess. But anyway, we would ride home every night going Tobbleton Road, Winton Road, from the ballpark, Golden Park in Columbus, back home in Hilton Heights. And every night, the sign painter, Mr. Bunt Hood, who was actually an actor, he actually performed at the Springer Opera House, which is the official state theater of Georgia. But anyway, he would have a different sign on the front of his building. And one night and Dad could ride one block over and not have to see it or not make me see it. But for some reason, he just wanted to see what was going on. And so we rode by there every single night. And one night across the front of the building, it said, "Dick Steele is a nigger lover."
Huh.
And I said, "Dad, what now, what does all this mean?" He said, "Son, it's just a misguided individual, and don't let it bother you." I'm 12 years old. The hell did it bother?
Why did it bother you?
Because I didn't understand it. Why are they calling him? I just thought he was I didn't realize that. I guess I didn't understand prejudices at that time. I guess.
So you didn't have friends that you were hanging out at 12 years old that had demonstrated those prejudices?
Oh, I'm sure I heard the N word on a sometime regular basis, but maybe I just didn't hang around with the right crowd or the wrong crowd, depending on the way you look at it. But I just didn't see a lot of prejudice growing up. I mean, of course, I knew all the names. I'd heard them. And I knew we didn't have any African Americans in any school that I attended until I got to high school. But it just, and I guess because I'm a bat boy for a AA baseball team, and I'm in the locker room and everybody's butt naked taking showers after the game. And we got black folks, white folks, Latinos. We got a little bit of everything. And I just felt like they were just ball players.
Just a bunch of guys, right? Yeah, that's it.
Guys trying to make a living. So I don't know how we got on that subject, but that was how Dad was. He was the same person to everybody, and he did a lot of things.
But more importantly, everybody was the same person to him.
Yeah, he
right?
didn't.
So he had it. The way he looked at them and the way he wanted them to look at him was pretty much the same. He didn't care if, like you said, you were the mayor or you were the guy pumping gas. Yeah. You know, that's an interesting lesson that you learn, because I see you do that all the time. You know, if we go to a restaurant together, you know, you're a guy who's going to engage the waitress and give her respect and find out about her and all that. But the thing that's interesting with you, you always know the guy that runs the restaurant or owns the restaurant.
My check's usually good. I buy a lot of scrambled eggs, I guess. Why they halfway like me. But
what else? What are the stories about your dad? So those principles, those are a couple of really key principles that you pull out as a young boy. One is, you know, people are people, right? I'm in business and people are people, and I'm here to help them and do what I can, and hopefully they'll buy something that I'm selling, like life insurance or whatever in his case, okay? But it's not his central motivation. You know, the other thing is that he's done, and talk about a little of this, is he seemed to be very community oriented. You know, I see in business, you know, a lot of times we get in business and what we do is we focus on the market that we're selling to. Okay. We don't think about our communities as much, because I've got to just kind of, so he seemed to go beyond that, though.
He really did.
What did you see him do there that affected you, and how, you know, and how you kind of became this master networker in Atlanta?
Well, after college, I went back to work with the Columbus. It wasn't the Astros. It wasn't the Yankees anymore. It became the Columbus Astros, and I ran the concession business, and was down at the ballpark every night, making a lot more money than I did as a bat boy, thankfully, and having fun. But I would see the books, and I saw we lost money just about every single year. You know, your AA baseball team, and the majors had not supported Bull Durham in some of those movies where AA and minor league baseball or baseball had become big. We'd have crowds sometimes of 18. There were more people on the field than in the stands. And we did professional wrestling on home plate. We 25-cent beer night on Wednesdays. I mean, you do everything you can to try to build a crowd. So he never really made any money. He would lose $10,000 one year, 5,000, make 3,000 the next year. And one day I asked him, I said, Dad, it's none of my business, but you're losing money on this team just about every year. Why do you keep doing it? He said, son, it's a place for families to get together and enjoy a great sport. He said, if the worst I lost is a couple of $1,000s each year, the fact that thousands and thousands of mamas and daddies bring their kids down there, they have a great night, they watch a team play baseball, they have peanuts, they have snacks, and they have some fun for 2.5 hours. Isn't that worth it? Isn't that what the community is all about? And it's kind of hard to argue that logic. And so he was never, he made a lot of money. He was very successful. I wish I was 10% as successful as he was financially, but he never, money was never his issue. One day I picked him up to go to a funeral, and I said, Dad, you can't go like that. He said, what do you mean? I said, you got on a T-shirt that looks like you slept in it for a week. You've been working out in the yard cutting the grass, and you got on shoes that look like a construction worker threw them away a couple of years ago. Well, I don't know. He wasn't pretentious. He didn't dress the part. He just lived life. And when at his funeral, which was he died on St. Patrick's Day of 2002. At his funeral, people that I never laid eyes on in my life came up to me and said, you don't know what your dad meant to me. He got me out of jail one time and never made me pay him back. He did this, he did that, he did the other. And so that's the kind of role model that I felt like would be a good life to live. And then,
yeah, but what you do is, it's one thing that you've got this influence from your dad, that you watched him and you admired him. I love that your mom called him at 3:00 and said, you need to get this kid out of here. He's driving me crazy.
It was 20 years later where I finally was tested and found out that I'm actually ADD, ADHD. And so I was bouncing off the walls 24 hours a day. And most of my friends say that I have the attention span of a strobe light. So,
but anyway, you learned, but one of the things that you do is you learned at a young age by observing your dad. I mean, to be thrust into that environment, because a lot of times, in fact, today, we don't see that. We don't bring our kids to work. We don't do that kind of a thing. It's growing up in that smaller community, Columbus, and him being somebody who was selling life insurance, meaning everybody that had a life was a prospect, right? Mm-hmm. That's pretty amazing how but it affected you in a very positive way. And you've learned some wonderful lessons and developed some very core beliefs with regard to people. All right. But you didn't get in the insurance business. Where do you take all you've learned from your dad? Where do you take that to make a living for yourself as you got a little older?
Well, I actually, in college, I worked at a clothing store and opened the store at, first, because the store opened at 10 o'clock, in college, I took a 7 o'clock, 8 o'clock, and a 9 o'clock class every morning so I could open the store at 10 o'clock, work till 6 or 7, and then go out with my girlfriend. And, it was hard to get up for some of those 7 o'clock classes. But what happened at some point, he introduced me to one of the guys that worked for him who was selling insurance. And he said, if you want to learn this business, Jimmy will teach you. And if you want to work here, great, or work somewhere else. And so Jimmy took me out for a couple of hours one day, and I introduced him to a friend that I knew that he didn't know at Bill Hurt Chevrolet in Columbus. And we were able to get a little group policy. And about 2 weeks later, I got a check for over $2,000, which is more than I'd made in the last 90 days, probably hustling for $6 or $7 an hour selling clothes. and I fell in love with the insurance business. And so I went to work in the insurance business for him. I had an office on the same floors as he had an office, and but what I found in insurance, it's a intangible. You're selling a death benefit or a hospital bill, and it just didn't. The more I did it, the less I liked it. I made some good money. I think the first year I sold insurance, I won an all expenses paid trip to Hawaii, and that was pretty good for a 19-year-old, 20-year-old kid, and I was the youngest person on the trip. But I just it didn't g-haw with me, and so
Why not?
I think it's the intangible part. I want to sell
How come
something that's got some
what's
answers to
interesting
it.
is how come the success, obviously you had success at it, and the money didn't overcome, the product you were selling in effect. It's just, did you not get when did you realize it? In other words, it's one thing to tell me your conclusion, but when did you actually realize that this isn't for me? Do you
You go
remember
sit
the
down.
moment when that happened or how it came about?
I'm trying to sell life insurance to all my friends who are 19, and all they're interested in doing is coming up, or 20 or 21, coming up with enough money to go out and have a big time this weekend.
Yeah.
Their long-term worry about their death benefit was somewhat less than zero, and so I had a good run at a particular car dealership, but it wasn't sustainable. And money,
Okay.
as you know, has never been my greatest motivator. If money was important to me, I'd have
Yeah, but,
some.
but look what you did. What you did is you're telling me is, and this is typical with when you're getting into the life insurance business kind of thing, is you come on board and the first people that you sell to is all the people you know.
Friends and neighbors.
Yeah. Now, then you got to go to the next level, right? And you got to figure out these are people that know people that maybe know you or know of you, or that next concentric circle out.
Right.
And that's when you really get tested for it.
Mm-hmm.
Is this going to make sense? Is this what I like to do? Um, and what happened is you didn't enjoy it. I mean, you got out there and you said, I don't feel good about selling this stuff to people. You know, you didn't believe in the product almost. Is that true?
And today I have much less life insurance than I probably should have at this point, because it just didn't float my boat.
Okay.
And at some point during that process, 75 was when, and to say I was working 18 hours a day selling life insurance at 1972, 73, 74 would be somewhat of a misnomer. I was selling at least an hour a day, and I was drinking and carrying on. And I had a group of guys. We played basketball every day at lunch at the YMCA. So I was maybe not as focused on my life insurance career as I could have or should have been. And so over some period of time, I just came to the conclusion I wasn't going to do that. And at about that time, on Easter Sunday, 1975, I dedicated my life to Christ for the first time. And all of a sudden, my priorities changed
Where
a
did that
great
come from?
deal.
Where'd
It
that come
came
from?
from being sick and tired of being sick and tired.
How old were you? 22, 23?
I was 75, I'd be 23.
Yeah, but I mean, how did you realize that? I never realized that when I was living that kind of life. I don't understand. It seems like awfully young to kind of give up on something that everybody else seems to be doing. And you were probably like me. You were recruiting people into the lifestyle.
My motto in those days, Charlie, was excess is not enough.
Oh wow!
If one drink made you feel good, drinking the whole bottle was going to be a better thing, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But what happened was
Did you get
Jim,
filled with guilt about something,
no,
or
Jim Coger was the general manager of the Columbus Astros, and
yeah?
I worked for him, even though Dad owned the club and another friend of his. Coger came to Christ at some point. He was a big name. He's written a bunch of books. He worked for the University of Georgia, a Georgia Bulldog graduate. Anyway, he started witnessing to me, driving me nuts. And I humiliated him, said everything I could about how stupid that was, and yada, 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 yada. And
What did he say to you? Do you remember?
oh, Ricky, keep, see, drive like hell, you're going to get there. And other, cute sayings but basically says, Ricky, you're not going to survive much longer at the lifestyle that you're living. I said, I sleep when I'm dead. You got to go. And anyway, just I just was not living a very working life.
But he wasn't gonna let you. He wasn't gonna let you go.
No, he wasn't. He was a pain in
Yeah.
the rear.
And
And
so, what are the things that you said to him?
oh gosh, um,
Remember, this is a family program.
yeah, that's why I'm trying to coach these words pretty good. I'm sure I made fun of Jim and Tammy and Oral Roberts and everybody else that you could come up with some sort of snide remark to make.
All right.
And Coger invited me to Easter service in 1975 to Evangel Temple in Columbus, Georgia.
Huh.
And he said, "Come, get there early, meet with my family." And I said, I doubt it. I don't know what it is. That it? Anyway, the night before I had a wild night, and I don't know what, but about 7:30, 8 o'clock, I woke up on Sunday morning, and just kind of an epiphany. And I said, I think I'll meet that rascal and his family for church. And I intentionally was there about 11:15 because I didn't want to sit with his family. I wanted them to be seated, and then I would sit in the balcony. And I sat in the balcony, and instead of being a bunch of hellfire and brimstone, it was Bill Gaither and Bill and Gloria Gaither's Alleluia, the play that was the musical that was big back in the 70s. And, there's a lot of singing, a lot of great music, but then individuals in the community shared like 2 minutes, 3 minutes of personal testimony. And at the end, I walked the aisle, and I'm
How
sure.
did that affect? And when you heard what happened in that event to you? Okay, do you remember what you were thinking and how you were impacted at
The
the
Holy
time?
Spirit took over. I don't think I was thinking at all. I think the Holy Spirit was so heavy in that place that day that again, I don't remember standing up and walking down the aisle. I just know
That's
that
amazing. That's amazing.
I'm down there, and
You don't even remember the invitation then.
I remember a whole bunch of people stood up and we started walking down to the front, and
No, that's really interesting
and,
though. I mean,
and
that's most people say, oh, and then the preacher did this or whatever. No, you were just up on your feet and walking. You don't looking back on it. It was like you were outside your body, kind of a
it was
thing.
like I want what these people are talking about, and so I
So tell me then, you walked down the aisle. What happened?
I made a commitment, asked Jesus Christ to become Lord and Savior of my life. Did not plan on changing any of my life because I liked it pretty good. And
Well,
but yet,
how do I square that comment you just made with I was sick and tired of being sick and tired?
well,
So square those two because that doesn't make sense, right?
sick and tired of being sick and tired until the next day. You wake up and you think, oh my God, how many thank you notes or apology letters have I got to write today? But
Oh,
then about 2 o'clock in the afternoon, I may go
and
out and
you're
have some.
saying to yourself, "Oh, they'll get over that. They
Yeah,
know who I am, right?"
yeah, I'm decent. I'm a decent guy, and I bought dinner. So what the heck. But anyway, it didn't work out that way. It didn't work out that way. As the day
Didn't work
went
out
on,
what way?
it didn't work out that I went back and did exactly what I did the day before. That whole afternoon, Sunday, it just kind of, I went over to this girl's apartment, and, we talked about one thing and another, and we had just spent the weekend, and I just said, I think I'm gonna go back to church tonight. And we almost had to call a paramedics for her laughing attack. And so I went back to church that night, and I got really, really deep. And unfortunately, I had no foundation. Didn't know anything about Bible college. I had a Bible. I got it in Sunday school growing up, but I didn't have any foundation. And so, because as I said earlier, excess is not enough.
Yeah, but how about this? You were so close to your dad. How did, you told me a lot about what he taught you, that you observed in the way that he behaved in business and the way he conducted business. Okay. And why he conducted business the way he conducted business. Did you not grow up sort of in the church or in a faith or anything like that?
Sure, we Methodist. He was chairman of the board. chairman of the deacons, or whatever Methodists call the board administrators. The minister told a great story at his funeral about the first time he met him. He was scared to death because my father was a big guy. He was 6'5", 275. My hands are big. His hands made mine look like children's hands. And but anyway, he was very, very active in the church, and we grew up in the church. But that's why.
Why didn't you take that piece? You
Because
took all the other pieces from him. Why didn't you take that piece?
Because of the hypocrisy of the church. Because Dad was very, very. He was a great person, but he also had more than his share of faults. Let's just say gosh, no, I'm gonna get in trouble here. My brother and sister are gonna watch this and kill me. He was like a lot of people, just had a lot of areas. We are all sinners fallen from grace, and we work hard to be the better person we can. But we all have things that we don't do that well.
Because of this sort of sin nature in all of us, okay, your father demonstrated or acted on some of those things, right?
I tell
And
folks
you said, here he is being in this church, and this is what the church espouses. Here's the life that, he lives, okay, from time to time. And you said, what did you say? You came to the conclusion what?
Well, I felt like church was a very, very important part of life, and the principles and doing unto others and what have you. But I also thought that there was a big life out there, and you could pretty much do whatever you want to do, and you get saved every Saturday night, or you're okay. It's almost like two lives. It's why so many people have a hard time with church, is because they see people do one thing Sundays, but then Monday through Friday they are a different individual, and maybe not all the time, but maybe from time to time. And so,
well, no, I think the church generally gets the thing that you hear about people when you ask them to go to church or whatever. They go, "Why would I go there? It's filled with hypocrites."
Yeah,
right.
Yeah.
And so that's the observation that you had as a young man.
Right.
It's hypocritical. But the other piece is something that also I think you and I share, and that is, we admired our fathers. We learned a lot from our fathers. And then we had a choice. Am I going to follow the ways of this church and what they espouse and all that? Or am I going to be like my father? And to me, to become a man meant work hard, support your family, smoke, drink, and have a good time. Okay. And so, I went, okay, I'll do that.
Checkbox, checkbox, checkbox.
Right. But I mean, you can't, in other words, it's hard to admire your father as a young man about how he comports himself in business and how he views the world. And then on the second piece is to say, but these 3 things or 5 things about him, I'm not going to do those. Okay. No, we kind of adopt it all.
You take the whole enchilada.
So is that what happened in essence to you, like it did to me?
That's pretty much the whole enchilada. I believed in everything he believed in. I loved to see the way he helped people whenever he possibly could. Riding down the street, he sees somebody with a flat tire, he pulls over. He may be in his best suit. He pulls over and changes the tire for a little old lady that wouldn't know how to pull a jack out of a car if her life depended on it. But then the next weekend, it may be a different story. But
I get it.
In 75, when I made my decision, I did a poll on the road to Damascus. I did a U-turn. I quit drinking. I quit doing drugs. I quit running around with wild women.
Why?
Because I felt like I had seen a different shade of the gospel that I had not understood in times past. And I began more seriously studying the Bible and getting more connected with people of faith. The people I hung around with at church on Sundays were a lot of the people I was hanging around during the week, but they were kind of like me, just kind of going through the motions to some degree. But then I got involved in a couple of Bible studies and other groups, and all of a sudden I thought, this is very, very serious, and I want to take it very seriously. And within a couple of, 6 months, 5 months maybe, I went and met with the president of the insurance company that Dad worked for and I worked for, and told him I was resigning to go into the ministry. And I couldn't spell ministry, which was probably a hang up.
Yeah, but was what happened to you then, was the result of what happened to you then, or did the decision that you made, that you said, I'm going to give my life to Christ, was it all about how I needed to act? Was it, I'm just going to be better and better and better? Or is that the kind of motivation that you had at that time, or the goal that you had?
I think it was try to be the opposite of what I had been for the last, 10, 15
That's
years.
what I mean.
To try to be, again, rather than moderation, which is a good thing, or, living a holistic life, I went 100 miles an hour, the opposite direction, and would have been the perfect kind of people that most people don't like at all, because they're Bible thumping, and they still may not be perfect individuals, because we none of us are, but they just drown, push, 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 push. I shared the 4 spiritual laws every day to 12 people that didn't want to hear it, and so by December.
What did those people who you told this 4 spiritual, what do you think that they saw from their side as you were talking to them? How did they observe you back then?
Probably very skeptical. Ricky, come on, I was just with you. We were all passed out at a bar 6 months ago. I'm sure it was probably, now some came to Christ at some point or another, and but others, just kind of blew it off. You'll find very quickly that, what is the old saying about drunks don't like sober people, and sober people don't like drunks? A lot of my friends became less friends. Your crowd breaks up. You end up not hanging around with the same people anymore. The 30 people that you spent every weekend with became 22, and then 12, and then 10, and then before you know it, you're hanging around with the Sunday school class, and you're just not doing that many things with others. And I've got 100 stories that curtail to that, but some of them positive, some of them not so much. But anyway, so that was a turning point. And
So you resigned from the insurance company. You say you're going to go into the ministry. What ministry? Would you become a Methodist pastor, or what? I mean, what does that mean, going to the ministry?
I had no idea. I mean, I hardly got out of high school, so I had no educational background to do it. So what I did is I was riding by a building one day that had been closed down because there'd been a shooting in it, and I saw the building, and I thought God could do something good with that building. And so I called the person that had it, that owned it. I knew him, and I said, I'd like to rent that building. And I created something called the Alpha and the Omega, a Christian coffee shop. Now this is 1976 by now. Again, this is a person that does not have.
You're 24 now. Okay.
I don't have any educational foundation. I don't have any deep Bible knowledge. Still don't, for that matter. But anyway,
yes, you do. Okay.
Say that. I know more than I knew then, to put it that way.
Oh yeah, a lot more. Go ahead.
I knew where Genesis was back in those days, and the Book of John. But anyway, I started this coffee house, and for 2.5 years, we brought in music groups, we brought in pastors.
What was the purpose? What were your thoughts about starting that coffee house? What were
you
trying to achieve?
Share Jesus with kids who are lost and that are searching for answers. And
okay.
We had almost every Friday and Saturday night, we had a full crowd. I ended up starting 2 Bible studies. Back in those days, you could get away with more in high school, and I taught a Bible study one day a week at Columbus High School, which was the biggest high school in Columbus, and Hardaway High School, where I graduated. Wow. And so I'm teaching Bible study at once a week. And again, it was a rudimentary study, but it was what I had to share. And
how'd you get the money to start a coffee house? How'd you get the money to pay the rent?
I called on a bunch of my dad's friends who had also backed him in businesses, and one of them was Bill Turner, who was former board member of Coca-Cola Company, and he was chairman emeritus of Synovus, Thesis. He was one of the people. He's one of the Robert Woodruffs of Columbus, Georgia. He was one of the deal, and I went to his office, sat down with him, and said, "Here's what I want to do, Mr. Turner." And I said, "I'm going to need a little bit of money, a little bit of help." And he said, he owned W.C. Bradley Company as well. He said, I'll set you up an account at W.C. Bradley. And he said, whatever you need, go get and just tell them to put it on my bill. And we gutted the inside, we rebuilt it, and I'm sure it was $50,000, $75,000, but that wasn't any money to Mr. Turner.
Why? His name Bill Turner, you say?
William B. Turner.
Okay.
Bill Turner.
Bill Turner.
His
So,
grandfather.
Bill Turner. First of all, that was your father had a relationship with him.
He was a partner in the hotel with my dad.
Okay. So what relationship did you have with him?
Bill Turner was a man after God's own heart. He was a mentor. He taught 11th grade boys Sunday school at St. Luke's for 57 years. He was a guy that would.
Were you a part of that? Did he teach you?
I didn't even go to his Sunday school, but Mom and Dad lived 2 doors down from him, so I'd known him and of him and his boys. I grew up with his boys and one of his daughters. So it just, Columbus is a big little city. Everybody knows everybody's business, at least in the area where we lived, and yeah. But I'm going back to this whole networking thing. Is building relationships. So here you are asking this guy who's a neighbor, okay, partner with your father for money. I mean, why didn't the guy say, oh, you're a cute kid, but, what do you know about a coffee house and what do you know about all that? Like, I can't help you. Why'd he say yes? He should have asked those questions because he would have been right. I would have had a T-shirt instead of Sig.
He was right,
My T-shirt wouldn't have said Sig said no; it would have said Bill said no. But anyway, because he had a big heart and he didn't, and money wasn't an issue. His grandfather was the first chairman of the board of the Coca-Cola Company.
Yeah, but is it possible that he gave you that money because of your dad, Dick? In other words, he loved Dick, you're Dick's son, and he's going to help you.
Yeah, no question. Look
at that. So you leveraged off of your father's relationship to get that first bit of money. It was his credibility, not yours. Because like you said, I had no idea what I was doing, right? But I loved Jesus at the time, and I'm going to start this coffee shop, and we're going to reach these high school kids for Jesus. That's what it was all about.
That's what it was. And then
what happened with that?
Well, we later found a building downtown Columbus, and we created, what did we call the thing? I can't remember the name now. It's been a long time ago. But we took a building and gutted it out, and we had a storefront on Broadway down in Columbus. And every Friday and Saturday night, we have Christian rock bands play, and we would have a bunch of Christian young people, stand out and pass out tracts and share Jesus. And we had a place in there people would come in and pray. And at one point, my dad asked me to sit down and have a conversation because several police officers had come to his office to let him know that you're pushing me in an area I don't need. Anyway, there were contracts out on my life because young ladies were coming to Jesus and getting out of the business that they had formerly been in.
Okay.
And so
the police officers went to your father and said he should stop.
He knew everybody in town. He was very active in the community, and so they said, we're getting wind that your son and that group that he's got down on Broadway are creating problems for some of the folks in business down there, and not a good business, and they want it stopped. And so the
cops were supporting the illicit businesses.
No, they were hearing the rumors, and they just didn't want to see my dad's son killed.
Oh, I see. Okay. I'm wondering what got you emotional. That's what I'm just trying. I just can't, I didn't.
Well, when your dad comes to you and said, there's a contract out on your life, of what you're doing, it brought back a memory that I haven't run through in 30 years. So,
how about that? So when you heard that, how did you react to it when you heard it from your dad?
Because I'm 27 years old, I think that I'm going to live to be 3,000. I have no fear of anything. I said, well, let them come, or some other smart ass.
Now that sounds like what I would expect, right?
Some other smart ass.
But the reaction that I'm getting right now is just something that surprised me. Okay.
Yeah. Well, with 50 years of wisdom now generated, looking back, it was ignorant. But then again,
What would
what?
you have done differently, looking back, knowing what you know now? If you knew at 27, and your dad tells you, there's people that are putting a contract on your life because you're shutting down, you're affecting some of their business. This is like Paul when Artemis got upset about, hey, we chisel out these little idols, of this female goddess that we all worship, where's that, in Ephesus, I think it was. Okay. And this guy's coming in saying she's not a god. Well, we're going out of business here. So they ran him out of town. So what would you have done differently? Knowing what you know now, your dad tells you you got a contract on your life, you're representing Jesus. What would you do differently?
Well, hindsight being what it is, I still not sure that I know. I would have maybe moderated my conversation. I maybe would I'd have sure I prayed about it a pretty good bit and try to think, is there another way around this? Again, being at 26, 27, I probably would have continued to push ahead. But in those days, you're not afraid
So
of
here's
dying.
the beauty of it. That's the beauty of being younger, right? And
Yeah,
idealistic is you don't moderate the behavior.
right.
You say, I represent Jesus Christ, the message I'm giving, the lives that are being changed. I don't care what those guys say. Jesus will protect me, right?
Or if I die for a reasonable cause.
Right. And then we get older and we get more responsibilities. We get wives and kids and all this going on. And we go like, well, maybe I'll change it a bit.
Yeah.
But you see, you wouldn't have, I think that's great. You did it. So what other question I had about that? You talked about bringing all these people together and how did all of that happen? Around this guy, Ricky Steele, who doesn't know anything but where to find the book of Genesis and the book of John. How do all those people come around you? Let's go back to this thought of networking. And, what I'm saying is, how did you become that center of attention like your father was in the community? It seems like you created your own identity.
Well, I looked over there for a minute to see if I saw a brochure of Columbus Youth Ministry where it's got a picture of me teaching in a high school with my shoulder length hair, part of the Jesus Freak movement. And we're listening to Barry McGuire and second chapter of Acts and Larry Norman and all the rock and roll Christian.
Well, I get all that. So tell me how it all came. Why you? How did you establish your own identity and get all these people come around you to the point where you were impacting businesses that were illicit businesses in a negative way? Okay, but changing people's lives in a positive way. I mean, your dad didn't have any of that.
Right. And
why you? What happened? How did that develop?
There's a young fella I'd love to have on the phone right now who would tell that story better than I could. But
he's not here, so let's.
He's not here, so let's just say when God is in the middle of something, He can take a horse's rear end and make good things happen. And He doesn't need me, but if I'm willing and able and willing to stand, He'll do the work. It wasn't anything that I crafted and said, I want to be the next, Apostle Paul or John the Baptist or something. I just wanted to share what I had to share, and things happened. I don't think I was in charge of anything, but before you know it, we're trying to raise money, and I was able to get some people to help put together some money, and we brought in Andre Crouch and the Disciples, and had an auditorium full of people, and I got on the stage to introduce Andre and talk about Jesus and this, that, and the other, and doing a lot of things like podcasts, but they weren't podcasts; they were radio shows back in those days. I went with Pat Robertson in the 700 Club to Israel and spent Christmas in Israel. Again, I had no business being in any of these places, but a door opens and you think, I'll go through that.
A door open. But what you did is you were moving, baby. I mean, you were engaged. You were on purpose. You were clear on your mission. You had no idea what you were doing, but you wound up having you became the leader of that movement, and people followed you because in your heart of hearts, you believed, and they believed in you, okay, in doing this. But yet, you kind of run past all of that very quickly. Like it just sort of happened. And you know what? It did because of who you were.
Yeah. I've been blessed, no question
I mean,
about it.
you believed what you were doing and you just went after it as hard as you could. From raising the money to bringing people in to starting these to saying we could even bring more people in by doing this promotion, but by bringing this band in or whatever it might be, or this great speaker in. Well, where did it go after a while? Obviously, you didn't do it for the rest of your life. So what happened?
Well, you know the story. You've heard it many, many times. In
If I heard it, I forgot it. So go ahead.
1997, I'm down at Golden Park, and I'm
Wait a
hustling.
minute. We're going from 1977 to 97?
No, 19. If I misspoke, 1977, 78. I've been doing this
Okay.
for about 3 years now.
Yeah.
I'm running this concession operation for a Double A baseball team, and I get a phone call. We didn't have cell phones, needless to say. Somebody comes down from the office and says, "You got a phone call in the office," and I'm slinging hamburgers, pouring beer, whatever. And I go in there, and it was somebody I don't know to this day who it was, but they said there's been an automobile accident today, and there's a little girl in a coma, and there's a lot of teenagers in the room, and several people have said y'all ought to invite Ricky Steele up here just to be with the family and just to share, hopefully some faith and some encouragement and this, that, and the other. And so I checked out and told them to close the registers and close up, and I went over there, and I walked into the hospital, and I'm not an ordained anything. I'm still 3/4 ignorant, but I had a heart for it, and they treated me. The hospitals, it wasn't even visiting hours, but the people knew kind of halfway what I was. I was probably carrying a Bible, I don't know, but anyway, they let me in with the family, and I. Now you're going to have me crying for sure, but I spent 5-6 days with the family, and a lot of young people came to Christ because they were hurting and they wanted her to get well, and she'd been in a car wreck. She was in a coma, and I was unfortunately very, very involved in the charismatic Christian movement in those days. The Pat Robertson, the Oral Roberts, the this one, that one, and the other one, and the
So
philosophy.
these were your mentors, if you will.
People
Even
that
if
I was
they weren't
reading
personal
and
mentors. These are people you admired.
listening to, watching their tapes,
Okay.
watching them on TV and this, that, and the other. And of course, that was a very faith-based message. Anything you pray, anoint the head with oil, pray the prayer of faith, and God's going to heal them. Or you got this problem, you pray the prayer of faith, da 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 da. It was basically God was working for all of us, and all we had to do was say the right magic words, and things would work out perfectly. It didn't happen for Jesus, but we thought we were better than Jesus because, we had the word and we had the 9 scriptures and this, that, and the other. And I told that family that that little girl would get up and walk out of the hospital. And I believed it with all my heart and soul. I believed it. I believed it. I believed it. The little girl died on Mother's Day. And I fell apart. My faith was not that deep. My education was not that deep.
Yeah, but you said you believed it.
I did with all my heart and soul because I had read all the scriptures. I had listened to all the speakers, and I believed in my heart and soul that God was going to heal her. We know there's been miracles. People have come back from the dead, or at least
So
I
then she
believe people
dies.
have.
She dies it. You got this
She dies,
absolute certainty in you that
and I had
listen,
looked her mother and daddy in the eyes and said, she will get up and walk out of this hospital.
and then she died.
She
So what
did.
happened right then? What happened
Um,
to you?
it was sad because I
Do you
believe,
remember that moment?
oh God, I was in the family room. No business being there, but I was in there.
Right. So what
I,
what hap- what happened to
I
you?
felt like the entire world ended. I felt like I had lied to these people. I had let them down. I felt like God had let me down. And uh, I remember everything about. That's 77, so almost 50 years ago, and I can almost recall 17 different conversations that happened that night. The family was such good people. they actually were almost ministering to me more than I was to them, and they lost a daughter, and it was just horrible, Charlie. And I did
What
not
would
I did not have another Damascus Road experience and turn around and walk away, uh, but I began questioning a lot more, and I began
what were the
struggling a
questions?
lot more.
So what were the questions? What
Why?
did
Why God? Why God? I've given up my life of decadence and this, that, and the other. I'm doing my best to live for you. I believe your word. I prayed the prayer of faith. I anointed her head with oil. I did everything that I thought was what I had been led to believe was the magic sauce or the formula. And she died. How come? It just doesn't seem right or fair or anything else. And
So it doesn't seem right, and you probably came to the conclusion, if this doesn't seem right, given all that I learned and all that I've done about all that with all that I learned, then God, you must not be right.
or
Did you
or
come to that?
or what I believed it to be was not right.
Okay,
And
so then there's two ways you can go. You could either say, God, you're not right, which means I cut off and I go on my own. Or if I don't believe what I learned was not right, then I just go deeper with God trying to find out what the truth is. Which way did you go?
uh,
There's only two ways to go.
but I'm not sure because I think I took more of the middle road. I wanted to stay involved, but I didn't have the passion that I had earlier. I mean, I was the guy that would go to
You didn't have the passion because you didn't believe it anymore.
you could be right there. I can remember sitting in a car dealership waiting for my car to get ready, and I'd see a bag of clothes. Somebody picked up the dry cleaning, and I would take that tracks out of my pocket and slip it into the pocket. So some guy's putting on his suit 2 days later, and he pulls the track out. I was on fire doing crazy, and all of a sudden that changed, and I went into depression. I didn't know what to do. I've got this Alpha and Omega coffee house. I'm speaking, and I never cursed God. I never said, I think that you're full of crap or that there is no God or whatever. But what saved me from going deep, deep, deep off the well was a pastor at that Evangel Temple, Brother Hennessy, who sat down with me one day and went over Hebrews 11th chapter. And he talked about all of the things that God did, the miracles, raising the dead, this, that, and the other, and healing the sick, and this, that, and the other. And others were cut in half. Others
Right.
were died violently. Others, this, that, and the other. And they both received the promise. That was what probably kept me from jumping
Hebrews
completely
11, for those
off.
who don't know, starts off with defining what faith is.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And then it gives the examples. That's what Ricky's talking about. But go ahead.
Yeah, and that saved me from going all the way back to to where or denying God totally. I've never denied God
So
since I
where did you,
came into a
oh, you
relationship.
never denied God. So where did you, so where did you go after that talk with him on Hebrews 11? You said, oh, that really kind of got me out of it. Where do you go with that?
I continued to push forward. By this point, and maybe this was, I don't know what this was, but the ministry was not doing financially that well. I wasn't getting paid anything, but my dad and others were chipping in a little bit. But it just came to the point where it was unsustainable, and we had an employee that we had hired that ended up embezzling, and we finally decided to pull the plug, and we closed it, and a lot of people were very upset about it because they really believed it was doing some great in the community. And I went to work for a buddy of mine, and who was a great Christian. He was involved in the Alpha and the Omega. I went to work for him, and gradually just kept going to church. But gradually, over a period of time, I got back into the mindset of where I was 10, 12 years earlier. Again, I never turned my back on God.
But
Um,
tell me how that happened. How did you meander off and go back, return to the former lifestyle, pre-Christ, pre going to the front of that church? How did that? Do you remember what you were thinking?
Well, it was the whole prodigal son experience. I was thinking that I'd been dealt a bad hand of cards. the things had not worked out the way I had anticipated them working out, and I got to make a living. I'm 27,
Why didn't you?
28.
I don't understand. Why didn't you blame God?
Well, deep in my heart, I believe that He's the creator of the universe, and He is all powerful, and He loves me with a passion that I don't understand, and
That's
I don't.
really interesting. So that's a foundation
It's my
that's in
foundation.
place that can't be moved. And then there's this thing that happened that I can't explain, okay, because I believed it would happen. So, there's that gap is confusion, okay? And so I start walking, I start not being as passionate about my mission as I was and I don't have a new mission. In other words, I, I can't modify it enough to keep me excited enough to keep doing what I'm doing. But what I don't understand is does that's sort of showing this sort of lack of following God, and you start following man again, and you start moving back into man's ways.
Well, and not having a firm foundation. Had I been smart like the apostles were and Jesus
Yeah.
himself, when I came to Christ, I should have gone somewhere for 3 years and been locked out in a valley or in a seminary or somewhere, gone out in the wilderness and created a firm foundation. I mean, I was, running to hell as fast as I could.
This is like saying you don't think pastors do the same thing that you did? Trained pastors, seminarians, all this. They have the same experience you had,
I'm
Ricky. That's why this is such an important conversation.
I'm certain that many of them have.
They're men too. Okay. So, how did you meet? So, tell me how you kind of left it. That you started to, like you said, you went to work for this guy who was in the ministry, right? At that point. And what did he do? What was that work?
Uh, he had developed a plant food, like a Peters or Miracle Grow or something like that.
Yeah.
But he was selling it through school systems. It was like, the kids always coming around selling candy and
And
wrapping
wrapping paper.
paper. Well,
Yeah,
this
that
was
kind
plant food. And so I traveled Alabama and Arizona, and I got this bag of Green Genie plant food, 2020. And so I'm selling it, and I'm staying in real hot spots like the Holiday Inn in Anniston, Alabama. And
So you're
just
selling to schools though.
so I'm selling to schools, and then the kids
Yeah.
do a program. They go out and hustle it. People buy it because they don't care. They just want to get the kids some money for the
Right.
school. And we did real well with it, and kept doing that,
I never knew
and
that you did that. So you were on the road selling.
I was on the road. I was staring in those Holiday Inns, down and out. I want to be down and out because I got my case in the back of the car, and I was a Golden Key member, which got a newspaper and a cup of coffee every morning. Holiday Inn. That was the first. Not frequent flyer, but that was the first loyalty program. Was called Golden Key by the Holiday Inn.
That's
And
great.
staying in Anniston, Andalusia, mostly Alabama, some in Arkansas and what have you. But I did that, and then by this time, Beth and I are dating or married. She became the Green Genie. She ended up wearing this Green Genie outfit, and at trade shows, she would come stand around, and we'd just, I've taken advantage of her more times than not, and begged her to do things she
That's
didn't.
true love, man, to be dressing up in a little green jean outfit with a little hat on.
Later, we had an antebellum costume greeting guests flying into Hartsville after we got back on top of the world with the limousine van bus company. But poor Beth, she never did anything
So
bad
how
enough
long,
to
how
deserve
long,
me.
how long did this thing go on?
Went a couple of 2 years, and then what happened was I was in Tampa or Sarasota, and I noticed that next to lawn, I would call it lawn and garden care centers because we had a commercial area in addition to the school programs. So I'm looking up lawn and garden care, and in Tampa, there's the next listing is limousine service. So there's 8 limousine services, and there's 4 in Jacksonville, and there's 25 in Atlanta, and there's this, that, the other. Columbus, Georgia, did not have a limousine service. Being as bright as I am, I thought that's what we need in Columbus is a limousine service. Sounds sexy, sounds fun, make some money, have a good time with it. And so I decided to get in the limousine business. I went to my little brother, who I got his Super Bowl check from Super Bowl 13. I got another guy, one of the Turner Bradley family from the Coca-Cola. I got 25 grand of him. I found $25,000, and we started Limousines of Columbus. And I don't know how much you know about Columbus, but it will not be the next great limousine capital of the world. We had 2 cars. It was 4 times more than we ever needed. And
How old were you then?
that would have been 28, 29.
Yeah. But I'll tell you one thing that you did have. You had recognition, the Steele name. Your brother was playing for the Dallas Cowboys, won the Super Bowl.
Lost.
Your father,
Lost
Dick,
Pittsburgh.
was big man on campus. I mean, everybody knew Dick Steele. Okay. And here's Ricky Steele now starting a limousine business. So you had a family name brand.
I did.
Plus all that you did, with that ministry, that affected a heck of a lot of people who are now, 5 to 7 years older. Okay.
So
what do you do with that? So you wound up getting 4 cars?
Right. Well, what I learned was customer surveys are a joke at best. I called on all Dad's friends, Bill Turner, this one, that one, the city fathers. I called on all of them because I went to school with their kids. And I said, I got this idea, limousine service. There's 10 here, 10 there. Every one of them said, that sounds like a good idea, Ricky. Good luck. God bless you. I think this will be great. The next time one of those rent a limousine for me will be the first time. And 3/4 of them are all dead. Go at it. Go for it. They didn't have a Charlie Paparelli that I had when I was getting in the software business that said, you're full of crap. That thing ain't going to fly. Or you got to do this or you got to do that. And I listened to you more often when I was getting the software company owned. I would have lost a lot less money. But there was no Charlie in my life back in those days. So they all said, go for it. And we did, which was a tragedy because we lost all of our money quickly. But what it forced me to do was move to Atlanta because I didn't want to go bankrupt in Columbus. I knew everybody in Columbus. I wanted to go bankrupt in Atlanta where I only knew my grandparents.
You were trying to preserve your family name.
And my reputation. So I came to Atlanta where if I went bankrupt, my grandparents are still going to feed me. And so anyway, I came to Atlanta.
How'd you get Beth to go up to Atlanta?
Alcohol and guns.
You're terrible. Okay.
Offered to shoot her. No. She actually quit what she was doing to come on to work at the limousine service in Columbus. She's just the most amazing woman. But anyway, what happened was because what I learned from my dad in the restaurant business, in the hotel business, is it's all about customer service. The most important thing you can do. It's why when I worked at his gas station, I checked all 4 tires. I cleaned out your ashtray. You can't overserve anybody in the service industry. You want to be like the Ritz-Carlton, ladies and gentlemen, serving ladies and gentlemen.
Yeah, that's interesting. This is, again, you learned from your father.
I learned that from him. So we were great in the limousine business. We just didn't have any customers. We get to Atlanta, and Atlanta is a big city on the upswing. The new airport's not built yet, but it's still in deal. And so most of the limousine services in Atlanta at the time, the drivers wore lime green leisure suits. They were more in the hustling women and drugs than they were in the limousine business. We did it by the book, 3-piece dark blue suits. Drivers got polygraphed. We did it like a real professional business, and we took off like a rocket ship. And
how do you even get started? How do you walk into a big city in the limousine business and get the first guy to give you a call, says, I need a ride?
Well, we had picked up.
Who was the first guy? Who was the first customer?
Well, we had picked up Callaway Gardens as a client, and we had to drive because nobody flies into Callaway Gardens, Pine Mountain, or Columbus. We would drive from Columbus past Pine Mountain to Atlanta, pick up people, bring them back to Pine Mountain, and then go back. So we had a 60-mile deadhead for every trip. But what happened was we were doing such good work at the airport, and the police officers, everybody liked us, that they started saying, you ought to do some work in Atlanta. And I said, I don't know anybody in Atlanta, my grandparents, and they're not going to be renting any cars anytime soon. And so we would get introductions and one thing. So
you got pulled into Atlanta.
I got pulled into Atlanta.
That's different. Okay, good.
Well, I say pulled into Atlanta. I knew I had to come to Atlanta if I was going to keep. Now, in the beginning, when we were first going up there to Atlanta, I didn't think I'd ever move to Atlanta. We were just picking up people and caring about the Callaway Gardens. But after a year or two, when it was obvious we were not going to survive in Columbus, and I started thinking about Atlanta, then I started asking other questions, and so we moved up here with 2 cars,
Yeah, but what
and
you're doing
2
is
vans.
you basically following the money.
Yeah,
You know,
and
if you got people that are asking you to kind of work in Atlanta, eventually you go like, well, no one's asking me to rent a car in
Columbus,
Columbus.
no, no.
I guess I should go where the guy that wants me to work needs me. That's where I'll go. And that's what you did. So you followed the money.
Beth and I got an apartment at Post Lake over in Smyrna, kind of
Yeah.
across from where the Braves Stadium is now. And it lasted about a week because when the apartment complex saw 2 limousines and 2 vans parked out there all the time for a residential area, they said, "You got to get out of here." And so we ended up having to rent a spot downtown. We rented a 2-room office over the Bluebird gasoline station, which that's kind of an iconic spot. And we just started doing it. And I joined the Convention and Visitors Bureau and volunteered to be on a committee. And again, and you've seen
Did
the
you
book,
just kind of insert yourself? Is that how you got to be a volunteer?
I went to the new member orientation, and they said, we're using volunteers on different committees. And I said, what's the best committee? And they said, well, hospitality, fun, party, whole 9 yards. And I said, well, what's the worst committee? And they said, membership. They expect you to go out and sell memberships. And I thought, everybody I sell to is a potential client of mine. I'll take the membership committee. And so
Ah,
I got on the membership committee. And my first year, I sold more memberships as a volunteer than 4 of their 5 paid salespeople because I didn't have any business. They get free coffee, and occasionally they'd buy me lunch. And everybody I sold a membership to was a potential customer of mine. And what happened was I got recognized. You sell more memberships than 4 of the 5 salespeople. I got recognized. Before you know it, a guy by the name of Ken Stowe, who ran Eastern Airlines Atlanta office. The youngsters aren't going to know what Eastern Airlines was, but anyway, he called me one day and he said, "Ricky, would you come back to my office?" It was on the property where Acres Mill Shopping Center is now, and he said, "I've watched what you did. You really have gone above and beyond. Would you allow me to be your mentor?" And I said, "Mr. Cambry, I'd be honored. Would you allow me to wash your car every day for the next 40 years? Because I couldn't get somebody like that." And he decided to mentor me, and he put me on all the Eastern Airlines flights to Mexico and places where
why did he do that?
because
Why would he call you?
he was a good human being, and he saw what I did. When you're willing to do stuff for no reason other than the goodness of the reason, people take notice, and that's happened my whole career. I've done better I've been a much better volunteer than I ever have been a business person.
But it is interesting, Ricky, and this is something that I think is part of the heart of networking, okay, is to do good for others and to put energy into doing good for others, but be strategic about it. In other words, you could do good. There's needs everywhere, everywhere. But you said, I'm in the limousine business, which is really controlled by the Atlanta Visitors Bureau, right? So
Right.
you say, well, I'm going to Atlanta Visitors Bureau, and see how I can get involved there and become part of their mission. You go and you say, well, if I take on memberships, then I'll get to meet every single person in all of Atlanta. In other words, I'm not selling my own service. I'm selling the good work of the Atlanta Visitors Bureau. And who's going to say no to an appointment? So it opened all those doors for you.
Absolutely.
So you put in the energy. You didn't do a sort of a half-ass job. You did the best job the best job you could do. Okay. And I think that that's so important, to as somebody who's thinking about how do I network, is you got to get involved with the organizations that have favor with your customer base, if you will, and then do the best job you can for them. That happened to me too. I did that happened when I ran High Tech Month of Georgia in 1995.
Mm-hmm.
That set the network in place for me in the city of Atlanta, okay, because I had a reason to call on them that didn't have anything to do with me. It had to do with we're all here to promote technology in Georgia. Well, who's going to say no to seeing visiting with me? So I got in talking to the guy that ran the Southeast as vice president for IBM. I would never have a reason to talk to him.
Mm-hmm.
That's when I met Ann. What's Ann's name?
Kramer.
Ann Kramer. That's when I met Ann
Sister.
Kramer, and that's when I met Michael Reen. That's when I met I met all of these people that have became namesakes in namestate in Atlanta, and because I was doing this volunteer work and I did it to the best of my ability. So that happened to you too. So that's that's one of the principles of the heart of networking for sure.
It's also a biblical principle. You can't outgive God. If you give, if you give with your heart in the right spot, there's
Yeah.
no way in the world you can outgive God or the community. You did the same thing for me when you hired me to do the study of all the technology associations in Georgia, which we created. That's how we created TAG. That
Right.
opened the door. I had just gone bankrupt. The software company that I tried to help my brother with, I stood in front of a bankruptcy judge. I had no dollars and no cents cash and probably $30,000 worth of credit card bills. And you got Howard Morrison, Steve Bachman, Kent Antley, and Sheila Dalmat hired me to do that study. It opened doors for me, and millions of dollars has not only come into the community, but I've done quite well, and that would have never happened had I not gotten the opportunity, because it put me in front of, I bet everybody and his brother, and I didn't know any of those
And that
rascals.
was a complete new industry.
It was brand new,
Right.
brand
It
new.
wasn't the Atlanta Visitors Bureau. This was now the Technology Association of Georgia, what it was going to become.
Yeah,
And so you got to talk to every single person.
I interviewed 91 people in 90 days.
Isn't that amazing? Isn't that amazing?
I'd be in
What a
Columbus,
lesson
Georgia.
to be learned.
Had it not been for that, when that last business went under, I would have moved back to Columbus, Georgia, and gotten a job at the Phillips 66 station, because I know how to pump gas, and live with my mother and daddy the rest of my life, had it not been for that opportunity.
But the other thing that happened is I found myself recently talking to somebody, and they were saying, I really don't know anybody. They wanted to do business with sort of the people in Atlanta,
Mm-hmm.
some of the movers and shakers. I said, well, I'll tell you what. There's this guy that's a friend of mine named Ricky Steele, and he knows everybody in Atlanta. Everybody. Okay. When did that all start with the Atlanta Visitors Bureau?
That probably did, because it was probably around 86 when people started asking me to write a book. That was the year that I won Georgia Small Business Person of the Year and got to go to the White House and meet the other 49 state winners, and big banquet at the Hyatt Regency, and Max Cleland, and just all kind of muckety mucks. And anyway, I was a kid in high cotton, and that became the kind of
And
the
that
piece.
was
And
the
then
small, what was the name of that award?
the Small Business Administration is called the Georgia Small Business Person of the Year. And a lot of people thought
What
that
an
was
honor. And that's when you were in the limo business.
a limousine. By that time, we had limousines, vans, buses, the travel agency, magazine publishing. We expanded
Oh
that
my
business
God.
a great deal. We'd become about a $15 million business, had about 100 employees, but that became the kind of the stepping point, or the jumping off point. And that's when I got through Leadership Atlanta and met Bill Bowling, who's been the other individual that's had the greatest impact upon my life, outside of my dad and you and a few others. But
So Bill was in the same class as
no,
you?
Bill spoke to us. We had
Oh,
the second section was on poverty, and the class had to go down to St. Luke's Soup Kitchen and have lunch, and we weren't allowed to stand next to each other. So we had to stand in between two homeless folks and strike up a conversation, whatever, and go in and eat. And then afterwards, we had a session in one of the main areas of the church, and Bill Bowling was the speaker, and he got up and started talking about hunger and homelessness. And I swear, you've met him, you know him well. I thought I was looking at the eyes of God. You look in that man's eyes, he has more love and character and kindness and empathy than I'd ever seen. And he had me hook, line, and sinker. And I got home that day and told my wife, I said, I met a man that's changed my life. And I'm going to be involved somehow in this outreach. And uh, like everything in life, I got busy next 2 or 3 days, and before I know it, I forgot Bill Bowling lived. And
Okay.
about 3 weeks later, I had a
But it
dream.
was, but it was a marker.
It was a market. About 3 weeks
Yeah.
later, I had a dream in the middle of the night, and
Huh.
and I knew that I was going to call Bill Bowling the next day. And for the last 37 years, there's my 30,
What did you
37,
do when you called him? What
37
did you
years.
say to him?
Well, I didn't know him, so I couldn't call him. Andy Loving, who was the person running St. Luke's Soup Kitchen, who took over that job from Bill, who started it when Bill started the food bank. I called Andy and I said, "Do you think this guy Bill Bowling would be willing to meet with me? I just want to talk about how I can get involved." He said, "Sure, sure, we'll set it up." We set up about 2 weeks later to go back to St. Luke's, and I told Bill this vision that I had. He looked at me like I had leprosy. He said, "I've been going after the hospitality business for the last 10 years. They don't care. They don't want to do anything. They don't want to do this, yada, yada, yada. It's just," he said, "I think it's a waste of time." And I said, "Bill, you don't know me."
Well,
No,
what was the proposition that you gave him?
I
I'm
said,
missing a piece here.
I said, we do banquets every day. We do buffets every day. We throw away more food than the law allows. I do a banquet for 1,000 people. I order 1,100 lunches just in case too many show up. It rains, 600 show up. I got 500 meals, nothing to do with them. I said, and I got trucks. I got vans. I'll take this food. I'll redistribute it and this, that, and the other. And he said, I don't want to, call you an
Rain on your
idiot.
parade
I don't
kind
want to
of
call you
thing,
an
right?
idiot, but I've been trying to do this for 10 years and nobody in that industry is interested. And I said, "Sir, you don't know me. I don't take no for an answer. We're going to make this thing happen." And
What does he mean by nobody in the industry is interested? They're not interested in homelessness and the food, or I don't know what they're not interested
well,
in.
I had one
I'm trying to connect the proposition that you
I
have.
had one big name restaurateur. When I sat down with him to explain it to him, he said, "Ricky, why do I give a crap about those people? They don't eat in my restaurants. I don't make any money off of them, and they panhandle in the parking lots, and which upsets our guests." And I said, and I'm not going to tell you the name, but I said, "Well, I understand that, appreciate that, but don't you think maybe if the people weren't hungry, they wouldn't be panhandling in your parking lots? They wouldn't be holding you up for money? I mean, isn't there some reason to do it?" And long story longer, he ended up getting involved at some point and had a huge impact.
Well, what's
It
great, what's
changed,
great about what you
changed me.
did is your heart was broken when you heard Bill Bowling, right? And so you talked to this restaurant owner, and you don't even know what you're talking about. I mean, he gave you a good. He objected. I mean, that's a good objection, right? It's not my market. They don't eat in my place. Just get them out of here. And you had but you had a broken heart, and you didn't even know how to express it, so you just fumbled around. But you didn't stop,
It was,
right? So what happened?
well,
So, but
April.
Bill Bowling, we go back to the Bill Bowling thing. He's saying like, I've never worked with anybody in the what business was it?
Atlanta, with hotels or restaurateurs or people in the hospitality industry. He had never had any
So he was
success with
calling on them, and they were just telling him to go away.
them. You're a good
So
guy.
how
We
did you
appreciate
start
what you
working
do.
with? How did you start working with him and make some traction where he couldn't make traction?
Because I had the largest limousine van bus company in the Southeast. I was on the
Yeah.
board of the convention bureau. I was on the executive committee. I was traveling the world with Andy Young and Shirley Miller, what's the mayor's name? Shirley Franklin, Zell Miller. We were traveling, selling Atlanta as a convention destination. I'm on the board of Georgia Hospitality and Travel Association. I'm on the board of the Hotel Sales Managers Association. I was pretty active in the industry.
So you were connected,
I was
baby, at the
connected.
highest level.
I
At
had
the
a network.
highest level.
Network.
But then, you could walk into something like one of the things that could happen is you say, here's this nonprofit, here's this thing that I want to get involved in, and I like all of us to get involved with that. They could have told you the same thing as the restaurant owner.
Not,
Why would I get involved with that? That's not promoting Atlanta.
theoretically, they could have told me that, but I was a big customer of almost all of them. I was spending money. They had a reason to buy from. They owed me nothing because I brought a group there. I booked hotel rooms. But we have a tendency to want to help our customers. When a guy that's spending $100,000 a year with you asks you for a favor, you're probably not going to say no, or at least you're
Okay.
going to have a hard time saying no. So I'm spending, I got a $13-14 million business, and I'm spending a lot of money at all these places. So
And sending a lot of people to them. That's what
sending
you're
people
saying.
to them, this, that, and the other. So what happened was I called a meeting at the Ritz-Carlton downtown. I called Horst Schulze and Ed Staros, who was the general manager, and Horst gave us a free room with free beverages, gourmet food, and I got every hotel general manager, the hospitality and travel, Ted Sprague from the Convention Bureau. I got all the muckety mucks in one room and let Bill make the presentation. And it was a little bit ironic. I heard Bill make a speech one time, and he said, I didn't even know what to wear to the Ritz-Carlton. I'd never been inside a Ritz-Carlton my entire life. He said, I didn't know how to valet park a car. But he said, anyway, so we're sitting there with this gourmet food, and we're thinking, this is kind of ironic. We're sitting here enjoying the lap of luxury while we're trying to help feed people who haven't eaten in 3 days. But nonetheless, that created the beginning of Atlanta's Table. And
what's that?
It's where we created a thing where we took excess prepared foods from restaurants, hotels, and caterers and redistributed it. Pano Karantasas from the Buckhead Life Group got intimately involved in the beginning. And Pano told me, he said, I don't have excess prepared foods. We're a white tablecloth restaurant. Everything we cook is for that person. And with the prices they charge, it ought to be cooked special for that person. But he said, Ricky, what you've done, or he said, what has happened here and what I see the future is, here's what I want to do. I want you to set up a schedule at 10 o'clock on Mondays. You pick up at Pano and Paul's. I'll cook 25 pounds of fried chicken. On Tuesday, this is freshly prepared foods for hungry people. I'll Buckhead Life will do 50 gallons of beef stew. Preachy will do da-da-da-da-da-da. And he said, I want to lead the effort for restaurants that don't have excess food to cook for you. So we got Beverly Soloff Shearer at the Coach and Six baking food for us. We got Billy McKinnon's Louise. You got me so excited now. I'm about to walk on water. Billy McKinnon's Louisiane cooking red beans and rice. And all of a sudden, I bumped into a lady once with the battered women's
When you
shelter.
have all this food, what did Atlanta's Table do with it?
We bought trucks. MPI, Meeting Planners International, bought us our first truck. It had to be refrigerated. We had to use certain health regulations. But we would then distribute it to St. Luke's Soup Kitchen, Battered Women's Shelter.
Who's running this thing?
We hired a guy. It's under the auspices of the food bank. We hired a guy named Rob Johnson.
Oh, it was. So that's where it went. It went under the food bank.
I couldn't run a one-car funeral.
That's what I'm saying. I don't understand.
Bill Bowling became the godfather behind it. I was kind of behind the scenes, and Bill is a great tactician. He knows how to run programs. He's an operations kind of guy.
He really is an operations guy. He's very talented in that regard.
Made it happen. I went out and raised the money and got the food donated, and then we began it. And I had a lady one time from the Battered Women's Shelter meet me at an event. She said, "You're Ricky Steele." I said, "Oh God, that always scares you. What did you do?" But anyway, she says, "I work with Battered Women's Shelter." She says, "I know every day that Atlanta's Table is delivered to us because I look out in the parking lot at 11:30 and not one car is left to go to Burger King or Varsity, because we know we got red beans and rice from Billy McKinnon's Louisiane. We've got something from Coach and Six. We got something. We're eating gourmet food that people pay hundreds of dollars to eat, being served to people and creating dignity in the lives of people who
Bill figured out how to pick up the food and how to distribute that food.
Amen.
Because he had that whole networking connection because he started Food Bank. Yeah.
Right.
And what's interesting is, just to recap, is you becoming, through the Atlanta Visitors Bureau and creating a successful limousine business, okay, knowing all these leaders in Atlanta, you get invited to become to a class of Leadership Atlanta. You go to St. Luke's Soup Kitchen. You have that experience with people that are homeless and hungry. Bill gives a presentation. It cuts your heart. Okay. You then meet with Bill, okay, not knowing what you can do. All right. And it turns into Atlanta's Table. So
Yes.
that was how you kind of jumped the fence, or built the bridge, I should say, not jumped the fence. You built the bridge from for profit work to nonprofit work, for serving the community as a for profit networker, if you will, right?
Mm-hmm.
Selling the memberships and do all the other stuff that you did. And I know you were on a lot of different committees and you wound up to be on the board of directors and all that kind of stuff. Then you jumped it. And then now all of a sudden you're representing nonprofit organizations, which further expands the footprint for the opportunity to network.
Mm-hmm.
Now you don't even have to call on people who need limousine service. You can call on anybody, including little old me, okay, and get me involved in food bank, and you introduced me to Bill Bowling, and look at the connections that came from that. That's pretty amazing how that. I'm trying to establish for people this flow that you've been through, which is pretty amazing. But what happened to the limousine business?
Over 100 million meals have been served through this effort.
Oh my God!
When I say
And
that,
all you did was say, God woke me up and says, I got to talk to Bill Bowling. That's how it started.
it's hard for me to say those words because I just don't believe it myself. But it's been an unbelievable ride, and what happened to why it got up so crazy in 90 or 89 or 90 or 91, we had a call from UPS, and UPS Foundation. They got a lot of money, and you give 100,000 here, 50,000 there, this, that, and the other, and they touch a lot of things, but they don't make it really change. And they decided they wanted to take on something seriously, so they came on board and gave us $5 million, and we brought in one of the consulting companies. I don't remember which one it was, but they came in and did a study, and we created a roadmap and a big, two thick booklets of how to do what we did in Atlanta. And so we began replicating it. People came in from all over the world to be taught how to do Atlanta's Table. At that point, I'd sold out of the limousine business, and I decided to take a couple of years and do this. And I went to Winnipeg, Nashville, Seattle, Dallas, 6 or 8 different cities, Minneapolis, and helped start similar programs. Many of them took our name, like Seattle's Table and Nashville's Table. Others, I think.
Who was the Bill Bowling who put the feet on the ground to make it work?
The guy who ran the food, or the guy or the lady who ran the food bank in that community, because they had Bill's blessing. Bill said, "This guy Steele's out and about. We've gotten some money. We can help you
followed basically what you did is you went to the cities following Bill, that the cities that Bill has already been to, because he was the one that started the concept of food bank.
He was chairman of the National Association of Food Banks.
Yeah, there you go.
And
okay.
He would call them and say, we're expanding the program. Would you be interested? And if they were, he might go. Rob Johnson might go. Many times I would go, because what I would do, the food banking and getting the food out, we had created a roadmap to do it, but you had to have support. So what I would go and meet with the local Meeting Planners International chapter, and I would do a speech. I would be the program that month, and we would connect the hospitality industry with the food banking industry, who had not really had.
So you did what you did in Atlanta. You replicated
same thing in Atlanta. A dear friend of mine, Gene Boyle, was president of the Seattle chapter.
You took 2 years. You took 2 years, no income, doing this work.
Paid my own airline tickets. Paid my own well. I didn't pay all my hotel rooms. Occasionally, somebody in Meeting Planners.
But I'm saying you weren't getting an income. I mean, they weren't paying you to do this work. It's pure volunteer work.
It was a joy. Best job.
So what happens after 2 years? I have to say this. What strikes me is how these things, 100 million meals that you talk about, how they just start with, hearing a message, being cut to the heart. Like you said, I saw God when I heard Bill Boland talking at that St. Luke's. I just felt like it was God speaking, It was like and you blew it off because you got it your own business. You get woken up. God wakes you up and says, it has to be, it says, go get the bill. And to see that conversation where you have no idea on how to do anything, how that conversation turned into 100 million meals. It just shows, you and I were talking earlier about Ephesians 2:10, which says you're God's masterpiece created in Christ Jesus to walk in the works that he created for you ahead of time. You also said when you were in Columbus, I said, how did this coffee house take off like that? You said, when God's in something, it's just amazing what he can do. And I think this is a testament to that. How could, like you said, when I hear 100 million meals, I just go like, I don't, is that real? Was I involved in that in some way? Right? Is that incredible?
It is, again, I've had some business successes. I won the Georgia Small Business Person of the Year. I stood in front of a bankruptcy judge when one business went under. I had another business that I sold to Cox and did pretty well. I've had more ups and downs in my life than the outside elevator at the Peachtree Plaza. But in spite of all that, the greatest joy that I've had is the service, because I knew God called me to be a servant.
I'm with you on the serving side, but then there's the practical side. I got a house, I got a wife, I got kids, I got education, I got cars. I'm doing this for 2 years. Where do you go from there? You go to work for the food bank? What do you do?
That's what I would have. That's what I would have done if I could have afforded it. I would love to be a nonprofit, but I haven't figured out how to live a nonprofit lifestyle.
I understand that. So you can't afford it. So what do you do?
That would have been
practicality takes over in the
that
end,
would have been 1990-ish, and I'm looking for a job, trying to figure out what to do. I'm meeting a lot of different people, and at some point, a guy from the food bank board, who I served on the board with, a guy named Oliver Kiss, who is a big shot PR guy from New York with one of the big name Maslows or something. One of the big agencies is in Atlanta. One of his clients is Coke. He's left Coca-Cola, and he's working with a client that does video marketing. And he said, these guys are in real trouble. Would you have any interest? Well, I know a lot about video marketing. I'd watched 2 videos by that point, I think, and maybe had a Blockbuster card, but I didn't know anything about it. I met with these guys, and Oliver was so good. He opened some doors, and I ended up joining that company as I put in some money, still had a little left, and put in some money and became the chairman and the CEO. I went out and raised a little over $2 million from family and friends on a Reg D offering, and we took off, and within 14, 15 months, Cox Media bought us for, it was about a 2.5, 3 time multiple, which now people start laughing if why'd you do it? But we thought it was a big deal to take $2 million and make it into 7 in less than 12 months. And so I did that. And then
that is a big deal, by the way. And I don't care what anybody says.
Well, we thought it was. We were pretty proud of it. And so then what did I do when I got all that money and I get my share of it and the whole 9 yards? I quit. I go to work for Hands On Atlanta, and I go to work with Michelle Nunn because I love what she does.
So you do. So you go to you jump the fence from for-profit to nonprofit because you can afford to work in nonprofit, and that's more rewarding for you.
It's where my heart is.
Okay, go ahead. So go ahead. What happened?
And so I'm.
So you're with Michelle Nunn.
I'm working on
Sam Nunn's daughter.
Sam Nunn's daughter, Monroe Drive, second floor by the movie theater, Monroe and 10th, and I'm out raising money. And then I started a new not-for-profit called Hospitality Helping Hands, and it took off. It did well.
Where'd that come from?
Where'd
that idea come from?
Because I love what Habitat does, and I love what Hands On Atlanta does. And Michelle, that whole program about taking local volunteers to do good work that's not getting done in the community. So having been in the hospitality industry forever and being involved in the annual conventions, I was asked to chair the 1992 Meeting Professional International annual conference in Atlanta. Had to raise about $2 million or thereabouts. And we're bringing in people from all over the world for this deal. And and there's always like an extra deal at the end of the conference. They go to somewhere exotic for, some of the people pay extra and go somewhere, and some do this, that, and the other. And I thought, we're bringing them into Atlanta, Georgia, the birthplace of the civil rights movement, a place where people care for each other, community, the whole 9 yards. So I came up with an idea. I met with Michelle, and I said, Michelle, could you put together a program through Hands On where we do a work project? The convention ends on a Tuesday or whatever it is. People can stay. They pay their own hotel bill. They pay their own meals, but we stay for 2 or 3 days and we work on a project. She said, that's impossible. And I said, all right, so what do we got to do to make it happen? And we went back and forth, and Dan Sweat got involved, who was working for President Carter as running the Americas Project. And we created Hospitality Helping Hands. And what we did, 130 people, after the 1,000 left, 130 people stayed. We built a playground at Benteen Elementary School. We painted murals inside. These are inner city schools. We did a track. We put in a track at a high school not too far from where I live in Decatur. And when the coach came the next day for the grand opening, he cried like a baby. His kids had never seen anything like that. And this was all people from all over the country putting in their money to make our community better. And that became Hospitality Helping Hands. And we hired a guy by the name of Alan Kelly, and we ran that program for a number of years. And so,
were you being paid by Michelle Nunn's organization?
That would be a no.
Okay. So how long did you do that?
I did it for about 2 years, and I ran out of money. And
but in those 2 years, you met Jimmy Carter.
Well, I've known him a long time, but I did get involved with him a little bit better.
Right, and somebody from his administration was very much involved in this, right?
I ended up on a podium.
He is the former governor of Georgia, so I mean, he had tethers into a lot of different power centers within the state, and you kind of tied into all of that, which is pretty interesting. So after a couple of years, you say you had to move on.
Yeah, well, the organization kept going, but I was out of money, and I decided it was time to go back to work.
So then what do you do?
That would have been 2000. Oh, I went to work for you. I left directly from there and went to work for the Southeastern Software Beta and Women in Technology, deciding what we're going to do as an organization and as an industry. And
so how did you jump the fence? Here you go. From Atlanta Visitors Bureau, Leadership Atlanta, Food Bank, and then you go into this Helping Hands, and then
bad story.
Then you're into the technology sector.
Yeah,
Where the hell?
No. I'm sorry. I misspoke. I'm sitting in my cubicle at Hands On Atlanta one day, and the phone rings. It's my little brother, and he says, "I need your help." At that point, I should have moved to Mongolia, or farther away. And he said, I've got a software company. I'm getting into technology. It's a no way to lose, 100%, da-da-da-da-da-da-da. Would you help me? So I drove to Columbus, met with my dad and my brother, and I got involved to raise the money for CEO of Quadbase Software. That was when I should have had a frontal lobotomy. And
why did you think that was? So you're trying to make money. Why was that a good idea?
Because it was my brother.
Why did you even entertain it? You follow me? It's like it didn't hit on any of the cylinders of any of your interests, except that it was about money.
Well, it was my brother. I wanted to help my brother.
Okay, good.
He needed help. Fine. He needed help, and I'm a good salesperson, so I felt like I could do it. I'd already raised $2 million for one business, and I wanted to help my little brother. And he'd been kind in me, and of course I do have a newspaper subscription, so I'm reading that this tech company sold for $42 billion, and this one sold for something. And I thought, well, maybe, good Lord willing, we'll do this thing for a couple of years, and somebody will buy us out for $42 billion, and I can do nonprofit the rest of my life and not worry about having money to buy Springsteen tickets when he tours or whatever the case might be. And so,
This is in your whole career up to this point. This is only the second time that you did something for money. It's only the second time. The first time is when you sold that business that you had, the video marketing business, and you sold to Cox. That was for money. And now this is for money. Okay. It's just interesting to me because everything else that you did, including the limousine business, was community-based and focused and service-based. This is different. So what happened?
well,
Give me the short story.
get two sales guys that can't spell computer nor know how to program, and let them go out at it, and then start trying to hire people that you don't understand what they're talking about. And that's when you learn about the mythical man month. How long will it take us to get this all put together the way we've designed it, the way my brother designed it? He's very, very smart. How will we get this done? Well, it's about 4-man months, but not 4-man months in a row, 4-man months in some historical time in the future.
All right. So you went through all the money. That's what happened. Never really got the product out.
$2.5 million every dime I had to my name. My dad lost $500,000 on it. Other bunch of good friends lost big money on it, and I stood in front of a chapter 7 bankruptcy judge. I didn't personally go bankrupt, but I
And what do you do?
did. Cried a lot.
Let me ask you this. While you were doing the stuff for just money, okay, to help your brother, how did that affect, how did you, one, leverage off your network, okay, if you did at all, okay, and secondly, how did that business expand your network, if at all, okay? Because your network wasn't part of that whole thing. So how did that work?
Well, I got in TER because I wanted to meet people in the technology world.
Yeah.
And then Lauren Burke invites me to High Tech Prayer Breakfast in '95 to hear Adolf Coors. That changed my world forever. And but I started meeting more and more technology people, and I started coming to your Bible study after the prayer breakfast, and so it expands my network one more time to give me the opportunity to do the study that created TAG 4 or 5 years later. But my brother.
So what it did is it expanded your network and brought you into a whole new industry.
But as far as sales, my brother and I went to Washington, D.C. 2 years in a row and met with the Life Association, all the agents in the entire country. We did a demonstration, and we won the Product of the Year 2 years in a row with a demo disc. We never got the product actually in the box, but we got accolades and this and that and the other, Product of the Year. And we're out and we're showing that to raise more money because we're just right on the cusp. We finally got a product, and the agents loved it, but it was not a enterprise version. One agent could run his business off of it, but you couldn't get enough volume. If you had an agency where 10 or 12 guys are trying to bang on the same system, then they could do a query, go to lunch, play a round of golf, go home, come back the next morning, and the answer would be right there on their computer. So it was written in Visual Basic.
I get all that. But what happened when I'm getting back to the networking issue here is you said, so you answered the second question, which is, yeah, this really expanded my network of people that I could build relationships with. It did that.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Did you leverage off of any past relationships with this business that was really about kind of making money?
Half the people that lost money were people from the hospitality industry who could not spell technology, but they liked me and they had seen what I had done over my career and successes that I'd had.
So they trusted Ricky. They believed in Ricky, I should say.
And we weren't asking for $2 million.
But it didn't do anything for the business. In other words, there was no carryover beyond money. There was no carryover to leverage that network for the business.
We never got smart money. We got all dumb money, family and friends, and then they had nowhere to open up a door. To get a Paparelli or a Mosley, they can open doors. Had somebody come in and given us $10, and I'd made them chairman of the board of advisors, and you'd have said, you got to do this, that, and the other, we might have created a product that would have been a tremendous success because the concept was good and everybody loved what we were doing. And the agents that used the product actually loved it, but we never scaled. And as a result, it ended
But
up
that
failing.
makes sense. I think the lesson here, though, is you've got this brilliant reputation. You've served you've served on boards and been involved in all of Atlanta, particularly about with the Atlanta Visitors Bureau and that type of work. Okay, you've done it carried over in, and it made a heck of a lot of sense in bringing hospitality into this nonprofit world of people in need of food.
Right.
Okay, that all fit together and leveraged well. Then you get into this new software company, and none of that leverages into it. So I think the lesson is when you have this huge network, don't jump a fence. If you can build a bridge, great. But if you can't build a bridge like you did from hospitality to food bank, don't do it. Don't do it. Even if it's your brother that you love, don't do it. Okay. So what did you then do after the judge and the chapter 7 and all that? Now you needed to make money. You had to make money. So what did you do?
That's when you hired me. That's when I did well, yeah, I think that's either I did a little project for somebody at some point in there, but you hired me to do it. It was a 90-day study on why we don't have.
Why did I hire you?
I was in a Bible study, and you figured you might go to hell if you didn't do me a good favor or something. I don't know.
No, that's what it is. But you got Lauren Burke, you said, invited you to the high-tech prayer breakfast.
That's true.
And there you heard Adolf Coors, the fourth. And you said that had an impact on. What impact did he have on you?
Because he did not preach the charismatic gospel that had hurt me so bad when who became my sister-in-law that I never really met while she was alive.
This is 17 years later
17,
after that
17,
girl died in that hospital.
Right, 17
You
years
hear
later.
Adolf Coors.
And he says, it is not about religion. It is about relationship. And I remembered the beautiful relationship that I'd had with Jesus 17, 18 years earlier, and how important it was in my life. Although it was only for about 3.5, 4 years, it was a fireball 3.5, 4 years. It was John the Baptist time.
Yeah.
And again, but what I did differently this time, I made I don't think we raised our hands. I think we might have raised our hands, but we filled out the card at the end of the prayer breakfast.
I just want to know what part of the message that resonated with you, that kind of relit that flame, if you will, that turned up the flame, that pilot light that was in there all along. What I don't understand when you say it's about relationship, not religion. It's not like when you say that, it's almost like you expected him to go, oh, of course, I see why you now got so excited. I don't.
Right.
Tell me why you got excited. Tell me why that flame got relit.
I had no interest in being in that meeting whatsoever. Lauren Burke, who's doing my usability lab for our product that we had for Quadbase, invited me 4 or 5 times, and I owed him a lot of money at that point because we were behind on our bills, and I needed to finish the project. So I thought, ulterior motives are horrible. I thought, maybe if I go to this prayer breakfast with him, he'll give me a little bit more credit. I can get this product finished and this, that, and the other. It was the morning of the hurricane tornado, and Bill's house crumbled, the whole 9 yards. And they told me this breakfast would be full. There was 100 people there, 150 people. It was like I was at a table with 3 folks. I think it was very, very deal. But I don't remember the music. I don't remember who the MC was. I don't remember anything. But they announced this Adolf Coors. I was fairly familiar with the products that his family had created over the years.
You were not. You're lying because you were never a beer drinker. Ever.
But I actually brought
I was the beer drinker. Okay, don't tell me.
I brought plenty back from Colorado for friends that did, because girls that you gave a Coors beer to might even think you're a decent human being, and I needed all the help I could get with the girls.
All right. Enough of this.
I knew his product, and so anyway, I remember him telling the story about his dad, telling the story about this, that, and the other. But his closing message was, I'm not trying to sell you on religion. I'm not trying to sell you on a certain denomination. I'm just telling you that a relation with Jesus Christ will change your life. It's about love. It's about peace. It's about joy. It was about all the things that I had experienced. experienced in a powerful way 20 something, almost 20 years ago. And it was 20 years, almost 20 years, 20 years exactly. And I said, I want that. But I made my commitment. I signed the card. And unlike the first time when I, decided that
You walked in the front of the church?
I was going to have a Damascus Road experience or what have you,
Yeah.
I said, I'm not going to, this is important. I'm not going to blow this like I did the last time. I'm not going to
Huh.
let my own stupidity get me in trouble. And so that's when I started asking questions. I had been looking for office space, and Bill Leonard had shown me office space. And so I knew he was a decent guy, or felt like he was. And then at some point, I read about the Bible studies or what have you. And I said, I don't know the Bible. I know 7 verses, and so I said, I need to go to a Bible study. And I don't think you spoke that year, but somebody said Charlie Paparelli is a business guy that teaches a Bible study, and why don't you go? And I think I called you like 8 times. You never returned my phone call. I think you probably figured out some crazy hey who. I'm just kidding a little bit on that part, but at some point you responded to an email or something and said, what is your interest? And I said, I'd like to learn the Bible a little bit more. And you invited me over to the building on Windy Hill. And as soon as I got there, I was scared to death because I knew less than anybody in the room. But I learned people, and people that I began to respect and love a great deal became friends, and I heard things that I had not heard in a different way.
Yeah.
Again, it was a conservative group, much more conservative than I am today, but it wasn't a charismatic group. We
Yeah.
prayed every week for everybody, but nobody said, pray the prayer of faith, and she's gonna, she's been dead 3 days, but she's gonna come out of the tomb. All that, and I've got a lot of friends that are charismatics, and I'm not trying to speak against them. I just, that whole name it and claim it. I just can't believe. I mean, not every. It just anyway. It's
Yeah,
not
but we got to concentrate on what happened is that was the beginning of your new walk with
my
Christ.
new walk, and it's been
And
going on
then it
20.
was also the beginning of a new network in a new industry in a meaningful way,
No question.
right? This is through this, you found this ministry called, that came out of the high tech prayer breakfast, or was the high tech prayer breakfast.
Right.
And then there was all those people that you met. And there was a lot of leaders in that business, a lot of leaders. And I mean, in that ministry rather. So now you're in this new thing. And because of that, I'm working with Beta and this reorganization to come to what might become Tag later. Okay, and they needed help, and we said, "Hey, could you help us?" And you said, "Yeah, I'll do that."
Well, I was out of a job. I needed income in the worst kind of way.
Yeah, but you said, "I'll do that," and then you're a sales guy. You're willing to call on people. You love people. You want to love on them. I mean, that's what you're doing. So you're doing back to doing a service for the community.
Mm-hmm.
What came out of that?
After 90
No, what
visits,
happened? What was your next thing? Yeah, what did you do
I
next?
wrote, I wrote the white paper that sold the concept of all 3 organizations combining their checking accounts, firing their boards and their officers, creating a new overstructure, then I had to go to each board meeting of each of the 3 societies and sell them on it. And I don't know if it was unanimous, but all 3 of them agreed to do it, and that became TAG. And probably in some weird kind of way, I thought if I do this and do a good job, maybe I'll get hired for the
Right.
executive director, and now I'll have a long-term job and go for that. But that's not the way that worked out. And we hired, I think, David Simmons, who was working for Richard Brock at the time, or we hired David Simmons, and he later went to work for Richard Brock. But
Yeah, you worked. We hired David Simmons on a search because Corn Ferry did the search.
okay,
Alan
Neely.
Neely, he did the search and he found David Simmons, who happened to be the COO of the LA Olympics,
Okay.
and who wanted to move to Atlanta, and he took over this startup organization called TAG.
Yeah. The rest is
Tell
history.
me, I know that there's a lot of things that happen in between, but I want to skip ahead to something. And I want to say at some point you got hired by um, PricewaterhouseCoopers.
Mm-hmm.
Tell me about now. Here you are. You're talking about one of the big four accounting firms, okay? And they hired you to do what?
Um, at the time, in the emerging growth technology space of the big five, PwC was number 9. I mean, they had no presence whatsoever. And Dan Giannini, who is a sales guy that got confused in school and ended up becoming an accountant, he has a passion to sell. He's just a wonderful, wonderful human being. And he heard me speak or was at an event or something, and I get a phone call, and guy says, I'm Dan Giannini, I'm PricewaterhouseCoopers, we met, da 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 da. And I thought it was a friend making a joke of me because I don't have a college education, much less any accounting background, but he liked me. We sat down, we talked about it. He wanted to penetrate and do networking into the emerging growth technology community. And he knew that I'd done 2 startups. One went very well, one sucked and went south. But anyway, he knew I had a passion, and I'm pretty good gab, pretty good on my feet. So,
But he also knew that you did that study.
I did the study. So
Yeah,
I showed
he
him.
knew that you were this networker, that you had a network that he didn't have time for
I showed him
because
all my.
he was running a
He was
practice. He didn't have
running
time for that.
audit and tax for PwC for the Southeast.
Right. So he was a busy dude, man. So he doesn't have time to go running around all day long. So he goes to you and says, hey, man, you know a lot of people. I'm trying to get into this market. Can you help me? What happened from that?
He gave me an office which nobody had that wasn't a partner, because he knew that I wasn't going to be a scatterbrain in a cubicle where I had to check in hoteling every day. So he was smart in many, many, many ways. And I set up my stereo system, and I went out and started selling. And every time I would make a sale, I'd flip on Queen. Another one bites the dust. Dan would run across from his office, and we'd jitter around a little bit. And partners would come out of their offices thinking that the PwC had closed down. It had been some sort of raid. We did things untraditional. And within probably 6 months, we had gone from number 7 and 8 of the big five to number 1 with a bullet. We created, we had PwC did the analysis of all the venture deals.
I didn't know all this. This is amazing. Go ahead.
All the venture deals in town. We had an organization that did and created all the venture deals in the entire country. And so we were reading this stuff, and I said, what do y'all do with this? And they said, well, we give it to Business Chronicle. They publish a story. I said, this stuff is gold. And coming from the hospitality business and the song and the dance and the this, that, and the other, I said, let's do a meeting and let's get everybody to come and let's tell them about it. You think anybody would come? I said, I can't, bet on it, but I'll bet you they would. First one we did at the GCAT, and the room sat maybe 125 people. I told them I only want chairs for 50. And we invited everybody and his brother, first 2 speakers, Frank Dalton and Sig Mosley. And we invite all these people, and I get up and do the summary and talk about this, that, and the other. Frank and Sig share their wisdom, and then we made it kind of a fireside chat, if you will. We had 130 people, 140 people there, standing room only. Urvash Kakarier was there, or maybe it was even before Urvash. It might have been Evelina. It was one of the Chronicle people, Brian Moran. And so it gets written up. We started doing this once a quarter. We had to move to the biggest room at GCAT, like 4 rooms, and we sold it out every single time. It became
I remember that. Those were amazing times.
It became like the happening event. We had to have a security guard because every service provider in town was trying to break in. You only got in the room if you were emerging growth technology company out of GCAT or one of the other incubators, and there really weren't that many then, or you had money. You were an angel or you were Nora Mosley. And I can tell you a lot of attorneys and a lot of other people in town that called me and said, oh, we've been friends forever. You got to let me in. I said, my hands are tied. Susan O'Dwyer
Tell
sits
me
at the
this.
door,
Tell me this.
and you
Well,
don't get in.
congratulations on that success. I
That
mean,
was
you're
that was a home run.
it's amazing. So you have a way. You went back to your roots of the coffee house. How
Right.
do you kind of bring people in? That's brilliant, brilliant, Ricky. I didn't know a lot of how that all came about. I participated in it, but how do you said I would go out and I would close a deal, okay, and we would come back and Danjini and I would be celebrating, right? Another one. But my question is how do I go from when you talk about networking in the hospitality business, okay, I understand that because what I'm doing is I'm sort of building brand, if you will. And so if there's this connection, people say to me, well, what do you do, Ricky? Well, I run this limousine company. We're in fact the biggest limousine company out there, but I'm interested in you becoming a member of the Atlanta Business Bureau, right? Well, the guy goes, well, and you leave him your card. Well, he's probably going to call if he needs limousine. Here you are doing work for the city, voluntarily. So I'm going to call Ricky if I need a limousine, right? So it's not a sale, if you will, right? It just sort of happens because of the good work you're doing as a volunteer for the community. This is different. How did you go from having to make a sale to your network? How do you build that bridge? How does that work? Was that harder for you? Does that make sense? What I just said?
It's
Okay, go ahead.
It's longevity, Charlie. Could I do what I do today in 1972? Of course not. 77, 78, 80, maybe by the mid 80s or late 80s, I was getting into the groove. But today, I've been doing this for 50, almost 60 years. I'm 71. My mother had me hustling greeting cards for her when I was 10 or 11, but created the relationship. So now, in one of parts of my speech, I tell folks I haven't made a cold call since, I used to say since Nixon was
here what we're
president.
saying is, how do you go from, just to put it in line, how do you go from network to relationship? We covered those two steps. Third step, to sale. That's where we are right now. That's the transition we've been through in this conversation.
And that's what I was trying to get to is I'm not a very good salesman. I am a relationship person. Right. I rely on friends and friends of friends to call me. I don't make cold calls, but what I've done is create a relationship, deep relationship, a relationship where I know a lot about your children, as you know a lot about mine, because we've been close for a long time. But I know a lot about a lot of folks' children. When I made a speech to the tag a while back, a lady got up at the end. I won't embarrass her with her name or she says, I enjoyed this. Everything he said is true. I did not know him a year ago. Somebody introduced him to me. I met him for lunch. At lunch, he told me about my husband's funeral and the fact that my husband was a motorcycle rider, and I allowed all of his motorcycle friends to wear their colors into the meeting. How can anybody know that? Well, you got to do the work, but it opens up the door to create a relationship. I know if that lady ever needs staffing, and there's a good chance this is going to be a good year for me, she's not going to call 3 companies and say who's the cheapest. She's going to call me because we have a relationship. It's going to.
But do they always do that?
No.
So it's the same as the limousine business.
Yeah, no.
There's a chance because I was doing this good work and I built this relationship. Okay, unselfishly. I mean, you were interested in what happened to her husband. You were interested in the funeral. You weren't just listening to it saying, oh, at some point, I'm going to get business from her. You're not thinking that. You're just loving her. Okay. How do you get to, it's not the limousine business. Now you're trying to sell audit, or you're trying to sell whatever it might be. Audit services, let's say, which was with Dan Giannini and PricewaterhouseCoopers. How do you get that guy to, I mean, he's got a CPA. He's got people that he's working on. How do you get to a quote close? How do you even approach a sale? I don't even know how to do that. That's where a lot of people get lost.
Yep.
Because I go one of two ways. Let me just finish. I'm either the guy that doesn't care about network and relationship, and I just care about selling. So I go in and sell, and I pitch my product and all that, right? Or I'm the guy that's like you, which we all understand the sales process. Or I'm the guy like you who bets on relationship and network and that's where my credibility from. And now I'm going to get sales. That's the one people don't understand. Nobody's teaching that. Nobody. So tell me.
The rule of sales is the ABCs of selling is always be closing.
Okay.
Which is bullcrap for me. You know, we all love to buy stuff, but none of us love to be sold. We love to buy because we got a passion to sell or a need or this, that, and the other. The guy standing there with a business card and a nice suit and a good shoe shine, you might buy from him, but the chances are you're going to call a guy from church or synagogue or golf course or whatever. The ABCs of selling should be always be caring. Be caring for that individual, for who he is as a person, for what his family is about, for who his kids are, and the fact that his mother died, you're at the funeral. I've got an entire section in the new book that talks about I attend more funerals than most funeral directors. Because when someone loses somebody, I know when I lost my son and my parents, the people that were there were just, yourself included, were just instrumental in helping me out of a gosh awful painful situation. And so when
So
you're
that's
there,
an example of always be caring.
always be caring.
So if I'm always be caring, how does that turn into a sale?
Because people know what I do.
Why will people buy from you? Because you care about them?
I would hope so. Not everybody's going to buy from you. But if you give a gift, whether it's caring or a bottle of liquor or a golf course or a concert, if you give expecting something in return, that's not a gift. That's a bribe or a down payment for something else. You got to always give expecting nothing in return. And then if you don't get anything, you're not disappointed. But more often than not, people are human beings. They enjoy giving. People like helping other people. Deep down inside, the meanest jackass in the world has a passion to feel good about himself or herself. And they will do something for you that is extraordinary. And I've seen it time and time and time again. And things that I don't even understand. Somebody tells me, you know why I did that? You won't remember this, but 4 years ago, you did something for my assistant. You helped her, bop, 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 bop. And that meant a lot to me. I didn't even remember doing it, and nor did I care because I didn't do it for the end game. Now, have I been that successful financially in my career? No, I could have made a lot more money if I'd have been always be closing, but I go to bed every night with a pretty good conscience, and I wake up every morning trying to figure out what I'm going to do next. You know, if you had all the money in the world, where would you put it? It just some of the most miserable people I know are filthy rich. I've been blessed beyond imagination, but I'm not going to be going to Tahiti or Bora Bora anytime soon. I might go to Snellville for lunch today, but you know.
No, but I like what you're saying. Is another way to look at this is to say, I bet on my sales capabilities. I bet on my sales methodology that I follow, right? I bet on my presentation skills. That's always be closing. That's what I follow. What you say is bet on relationships, real relationships, bet on relationships. It's a good bet. That's what you're saying. You're the counter to every piece of sales training that's ever gone on. They always do a throw in on how you should build relationships. How when you sit in a guy's office, you say, if you see his wife's picture there, you know that his marriage is important to him and all that. So start talking about your marriage. In other words, start building these bridges to build relationships, but ultimately always be closing. And you're sitting there saying, no, I might sit there and talk to this guy about his marriage or what's going on in his life or his kids or his kids' football team. And that's kind of the end of it, and over time we build a pretty good relationship because I tell him what's going on with my boys and my daughter. And he'll think of me when he needs whatever I offer because he knows what I offer and he'll buy from me. Is that a good summary, is to say you're the bet on relationships guy?
Always. Again, I may not ever be the greatest sales guy that ever lived, but I'll always have a plate of food in front of me and a place to live and a good feeling. And again, as you know, you attended some events. I've been very blessed the last couple of years to win a few awards along the way. They weren't for salesmanship, they were for community service. And yet the people in the room are important folks and folks that at some point, if they want to buy something from me, they know I'll be tickled to death to sell them. But yesterday, perfect example, a lady that I know has a ton of business. She's just gotten a new job. I was excited. I looked how many openings she had, et cetera, et cetera. We sat down, we exchanged a few pleasantries, and I said something about, how are you doing for the holidays? And she began to tell me about her mom who committed suicide and bop, 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 bop.
Wow.
And we never, ever, ever broached, well, that's not 100% true. We talked about getting together at a later time to talk about perhaps doing some business next year. It might happen, might not happen. I don't care. I mean, I do care.
Tell me, we got to bring this thing to a close here, okay? Something that you said in your book really, it resonated with me because having observed you over the last 30 years, I said, that is Ricky Steele. That is the heart of networking. And I just wondered if you'd expand on it a little bit. What you said was, networking is a way of working and a way of living. Nobody that I have ever heard talk about networking has ever said that. There's something exciting about it, and there's something purposeful about it, but there's something also that's heartfelt. That says, I'm not working just to work. I'm working because I love people. That might be another way. But how do you kind of just expand on that a little bit and where that came from? Because that's a summary. That's your summary. That's not mine. I'll repeat it. Networking is a way of working and a way of living.
Yep. People who need people are the luckiest people on this world, on this earth. And I need people to exist. I need people to love. God has told us to love him first and then love our neighbor as ourselves. So what else do we have? What are the other jobs? I think that he only gave us 2 jobs. And if we don't get those 2 right,
that's the greatest commandments as talked about by Christ, right?
That's it. And so if we don't get either one of those right, the rest of it's just fluff and doesn't make any difference. So to me, it's networking. It's not net vacationing, net laying around, net hoping you win the lottery. It is networking. And that work means you devote whatever hours it takes to create relationships and find situations where something you've done in your life or some relationship can help someone else be successful. And if you'll help other people be successful, there's generally going to be a line of folks standing there helping you be successful if they have a similar opportunity. So again, there's too many people that go through life so fast and furious that the size of the crowd at their funeral is going to be determined by the weather, not by anything they did. To me, you want to live a life where even the funeral director cries because you did a lot for a lot of other people. And I saw my dad do that. I've seen others do that. And I'm not near as good. And my wife, when she listens to this, she's going to say, whoa, you pushed it a little bit hard, didn't you? Or you didn't tell them about the time that you screwed this one up so royally, because I'm a sinner saved by grace, and I have made more than my fair share of mistakes. But my motivation has always been deep in my heart to try to make someone else feel good about themselves. Because life is hard. Life is tough. And even with the best faith in the world, you're going to get your teeth kicked out. You're going to lose a child. There's nothing like losing a child. You're going to lose a spouse. You're going to go bankrupt. Life is hard. So if I can do something today to take a little bit of that pain away from your life, to be a shock absorber for you, then maybe that's the only reason God put me on this earth.
That was all well said. In the last 2 years, you've gotten several awards of recognition of your life's work. What were the awards? Just tell me the names of them and from what organization.
One was the Aurora Day Camp for Children with Cancer. They gave me a Lifetime Community Service Award. Most recently, you were there, I got the Tech Bridge Ann Kramer Award, which was so humbling. Ann Kramer is an iconic figure. We
Right.
happened to have served on the same had the same September 13th birthday, and Ann adopted me in 1984, and I wouldn't be where I am today without Ann Kramer and her influence on my life. And to win the Ann Kramer Award, which is for volunteerism,
Okay.
and so
What
that's
other award? You got one recently, didn't you?
oh Lord, those are the two. Those are the two biggest ones by far. And I've got a few others. The Georgia Small Business Person of the Year. I won something top 10 something from Hands on Atlanta. Top five Georgians
Yeah,
from the
you always get
JCs.
to me. You're always being recognized for the commitment that you make, and I'm not bringing these things up so that to build you up, but to show the audience people your people remember what you've done for them, and they want to recognize you for that. People remember or recognize, I should say, is a better word for what you've done for the community, and they want to hold that up and recognize that because they want others to do the same. We want to do what you do, but a lot of times that we don't. But you've been you're a great man, and you have been incredibly additive to the Atlanta community at large, whether you be in the transportation business, okay, or the Atlanta Visitors Bureau, okay, or through the nonprofit world in Atlanta, okay, or to the technology sector in Atlanta. You've touched thousands of people's lives in a very positive way. And
Thank you, Charlie.
I wrote down a summary that said, what if I had to summarize everything that Ricky said about this networking? How do you do networking? I wrote down, love people, not money, and trust the Lord will provide.
That's pretty good. Thank you.
And that is how I'm going to always remember my friend Ricky Steele. But I love you, Ricky, and I really appreciate you spending this time. This has been really special.
Mm.
I hope it's been special for you.
Yeah, it was great fun. Thank you, Charlie. I love you as well, as you well know, and your family too, Kathy and the kids. But we've had a heck of a run together, and it's
Yeah.
not over yet. We're still vertical, so we're going to continue pushing
Well, the
on.
thing that's great too is, you get to 71 before I did. I always like that.
Yep, yep, yep. We'll see how that works out for 72. But anyway, it's just a great joy, and Atlanta's such a great city. So I think that we're blessed to be in a city where there's, I think, a lot of positivity and our technology community and the leadership there. But again, like everybody else in the world, I'm out there every day trying to do the best that I can, and as a sales guy, looking for that next deal, and I know
But
that it'll come in next week.
I hope that there's some people that watch this and they get inspired to step in to the shoes, your shoes, to be the next Ricky Steele, to do what you're not going to do because of your age and, the aging of your network and all that. As Bill Bolin has left, like the food bank and stuff.
Right.
And you don't have the same relationship with the guy that runs it now, and he's different view of life and food than Bill did. It's just things move on. But there is these younger Ricky Steeles. There's these 35-year-old men and women who they hear a presentation, it cuts their heart. They make the call, and another million meals or another million, name it, change people's lives that are in need. I just think it's amazing. So that's what this should be. This should serve as an inspiration of what one guy who just keeps getting up when he gets knocked down and keeps walking, the changes that he can make. And you've been that guy. So thanks, man.
It was a privilege, Charlie, a privilege.
Awesome.
Huge in every way.
It's been huge. Okay. Well, hang on. I'm gonna cut off this recording and we'll talk for a second. Thanks.